Chapter 573. Old Man Su's eyes were wide open as he spun around in fear. "Old man, are you all right?" Muyu asked nervously. He was sure that he had already broken the formation on Old Su's body. How could something still happen to him? Old Su suddenly let out a long sigh of relief. The nervousness on his face gradually faded away. At the same time, he touched his forehead and pulled his mouth. When he felt pain, he patted his chest and said with lingering fear, Fortunately, Wang Eryang was taken away by old Zhao when she came here a few days ago. Fortunately, I am fine." Muyu rolled his eyes. How could he have expected that old Su would do such a thing? He thought that he had missed something and harmed old Su. He was ready to feel guilty, but it turned out to be a false alarm. "You are fine, but you gave me a fright." Muyu smiled helplessly. "Immortal Master, you are really amazing. You actually lifted my curse." "Old man," Su said gratefully. "What did old Zhao say after that?" Muyu asked. Old Su said carefully, "Now that the seal has been lifted, you humans..." Old Su paused for a moment. He touched his forehead and pulled his face. When he found that he was still fine, he let go of his courage and said, "All of you humans will be our prey. I have already planted a curse on your body. I will wait for the day when you die, and then I will come back to welcome each of you and your descendants. Remember, if any of you dares to speak of today's matter, I will immediately take you away. Then you will die without knowing why." Old Man Su repeated the words he heard that day, without missing a single word. That's all. What else did he do? Muyu felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Oh, right, he first laughed for a while. Then he did this action. Let me show you. I almost forgot. Old Zhao only has 4 fingers on his right hand. His index finger was accidentally broken by a stone when he was young. Old Man Su puffed out his chest and cleared his throat. He coughed twice and bent his index finger down. Then he spread out his remaining 4 fingers with his palms facing the sky. He laughed first. That's how he laughed. Ha ha. Originally, he was telling a ghost story about a dead person coming back to life. It was such a serious matter, but Old Man Su suddenly burst out laughing, which amused Muyu. Muyu couldn't help but laugh out loud. He was really defeated by Old Su. Who would have thought that Old Su would be able to do such a thing? He even learned the way others laughed. He thought that Old Su wasn't a storyteller, but a farmer here. Old Su's talent was truly buried. Muyu didn't want to be a storyteller. Old Man Su laughed for a while. Then he ground his teeth and pretended to be vicious as he said, "We have finally arrived at the 3rd heaven. This place will eventually belong to us." Muyu's laughter stopped abruptly. "What did you just say? Didn't you hear me clearly?" "Then I'll say it again. Ha ha." Old Man Su was about to laugh again. No, it's the sentence after laughing. Muyu quickly waved his hand. He tried to tell himself that this was an investigation of a dead person. He had to be serious and couldn't laugh along with Old Man Su. "We have finally arrived at the 3rd heaven. This place will eventually belong to us." Old Man Su said, "We have finally arrived at the 3rd heaven. This place will eventually belong to us?" Muyu was slightly startled. What the hell was going on? He was sure that Old Man Zhao was being controlled by someone, but why would the person controlling Old Man Zhao say such strange words like, "We have finally arrived at the 3rd heaven"? Could it be that this person wasn't a person from the 3rd heaven? Muyu's heart was in turmoil. He knew that this world was definitely not that simple. The place they were at was called the 3rd heaven. When he was at the danding school, he went to the 2nd heaven. This meant that there should be other worlds like the 1st heaven and the 4th heaven. However, other than the 2nd heaven, he didn't know anything about the existence of other worlds. Could it be that the person controlling Old Man Zhao came from another world? The 2nd heaven was a demonic beast. It was definitely impossible. Then, could it be a person from the 1st heaven or the 4th heaven? So, the disappearance of the dead people in the chaotic burial valley was related to this mysterious person? But why didn't he directly kill everyone? Instead, he waited for everyone to die before coming to greet them? What was his purpose in killing the descendants of Old Man Zhao? Things became complicated and confusing again. Muyu originally thought that it was the people from the Gate of Hell who were causing trouble. He didn't expect that it was actually an even more mysterious existence. However, Muyu searched the entire chaotic burial valley and didn't find the so-called seal. He also didn't see where this guy was. How was he going to greet the dead villagers? Old man, help me gather all the villagers. I will first remove the curse in everyone's body. Muyu said, Lord Immortal Master, just call me Old Man Su. Old Man Su quickly said. Then, he quickly ran to call the villagers to remove the curse. Muyu pondered in his heart. He felt that he had to think of a way to lure that guy out. The situation in the third heaven was already chaotic enough. If a mysterious outsider were to intervene, it would be hard to imagine how the situation would end. Very quickly, Old Man Su called all the villagers over. However, although the majority of the villagers respected Muyu, they still didn't believe Old Man Su's words. He's so young. How could he have the ability to remove the curse? Old Man Su, are you lying? Widow Zhang at the head of the village said with a face full of doubt. That's right. We don't want to be the second Wang Earnyang. Matzi said the thoughts of all the villagers. Old Man Su patted his chest to assure them. At the same time, he also told them about the warning that Old Man Zhao had given them, including the haha demonstration. In the end, when everyone saw that Old Man Su was actually safe and sound, they all believed Old Man Su's words. Removing the heart-losing array was not difficult for Muyu. The person who had placed the array on the villagers was not very skilled. At least, compared to Muyu, it was like a small child in front of a great magician. Muyu easily dispelled the array formation in everyone's body. The villagers thanked Muyu profusely, but Muyu was thinking about something else. Lord Immortal Master, if you have any other orders, just say it. Old Man Su's face was full of respect. Muyu glanced at the villagers who were in awe of him. After pondering for a moment, he asked, What did you do with the dead Wang Earnyang? Did you send her to the disorderly burial valley? Old Man Su quickly waved his hand and said, You mean the Sky Burial Valley? How we dare to go there? Ever since that incident, the Sky Burial Valley has become a place of trouble. We didn't want Wang Earnyang to come back to life and take away her descendants. That's why we buried her. The disorderly burial valley was called the Sky Burial Valley by self-cultivators. After all, it was thrown down from the sky. The villagers nearby all believed that it was the path to the afterlife. Since she had been buried, Muyu did not want to disturb the innocent dead. He needed to think of another way. Lord Immortal Master, I see that it's getting late. Why don't you stay at my house for the night? Old Man Su asked tentatively. Then I'll have to trouble you. Also, my name is Muyu. Muyu really needed to think about this matter. The most important thing was that he had removed the array in the villagers. If the mysterious person found out, he did not know if he would kill them. Muyu needed to ensure the safety of all the villagers. No trouble, no trouble. Lord Muyu, you can stay at my house. It's my honor. Old Man Su said excitedly. Old Man Su received Muyu very warmly. From Old Man Su, Muyu also learned about Old Man Zhao's life. Although in a sense, Old Man Zhao taking away his 3 sons was a way to vent his anger, Muyu didn't think that the mysterious guy was here to help Old Man Zhao uphold justice. If you ask me, Lord Muyu, you can go to Chun Erzwang's shop in the village and ask about the situation. He might know something. Old Man Su poured a cup of homemade rice wine for Muyu. Then he ran to the kitchen and brought out the freshly made roast goose. The homemade roast goose had a special flavor. Little Handsome ate happily. Who is Chun Erzwang? Muyu tasted the rice wine. It was spicy with a hint of sweetness. It was really not bad. Old Man Su answered Muyu and sat opposite of Muyu. He seemed to be ill at ease. It was obvious that eating with Muyu made him feel very uncomfortable. However, looking at Muyu's amiable appearance, he was no longer afraid. Old Man Su drank a mouthful of rice wine and said, Chun Erzwang is a business that specializes in dealing with the dead. When someone dies in the nearby villages, they would ask him to customize a coffin to host the funeral. He was also present that day. I heard that Chun Erzwang has a pair of yin-yang eyes that can communicate with souls. That day, he was caught in the air by Old Man Zhao. However, for some reason, Old Man Zhao released him. All right, when you removed the curse for us today, I didn't see him. Yin-yang eyes? Don't tell me he's a fraud? Little Handsome said incoherently. "Io, little mouse, how can you speak?" Old Man Sue was so scared that he almost fell off his chair. Little Handsome had been busy eating since the beginning. Old Man Sue only thought that it was an immortal bird, so he didn't pay much attention. However, Little Handsome suddenly opened his mouth and spoke, giving Old Man Sue a fright. "Bah, you're the little mouse. My name is Little Handsome. Little is little as in Little Handsome, and handsome as in Little Handsome. If it wasn't for the fact that you gave me food, I would beat you up." Little Handsome waved the half-eaten goose leg and shouted in dissatisfaction. "Uncle, don't mind it. It's a bit naughty." Muyu grabbed Little Handsome's tail and stopped it from causing trouble. Old Man Sue looked at Little Handsome. Seeing that Little Handsome was very cute and didn't have any aggressive nature, he couldn't help but say, "An immortal's pet is really different. It can even speak, unlike my big yellow dog that only knows how to bark. Last time, it even peeped on Widow Zhang bathing and was almost chopped up by her. Of course, I'm much smarter than your big yellow dog. Bah, you're the pet. Your whole family are pets. Don't compare me to a dog." Little Handsome showed his sharp little teeth and said angrily. Long Tongue was already laughing her head off. Muyu quickly picked up a piece of meat and stuffed it into Little Handsome's mouth to divert its attention. "You're saying that Chun Erzwang was caught in the air by Old Man Zhao and was put down safely?" Muyu felt that something was wrong. "Yes, that's right. Just like that." Old Man Sue reached out his hand and bent his fingers into a claw. He pointed it at Little Handsome, as if he wanted to catch Little Handsome in the air. Little Handsome was too lazy to move. With a plop sound, it spat the bone into Old Man Sue's hand. Chapter 574. Chun Erzwang's shop was located in the most remote alley in the village. The alley was deserted, and no one had walked past it for a long time. Only a few withered yellow leaves floated on the ground and bounced on the ground. The cobblestone road on the ground was very smooth, and it looked like it had been there for a long time. Grass grew in the cracks of the stones, indicating that very few people had set foot in this place. The entire alley was filled with silence. People who often dealt with the dead would usually stay away from them. After all, the villagers felt that the dead had bad luck and didn't want to be contaminated. No one would go to other people's coffin shops for no reason. However, Chun Erzwang was the only shop in the nearby villages that did funeral business. Whenever an elderly person passed away or a family member passed away, they would go to Chun Erzwang. When he found old Sue, Chun Erzwang rarely talked to others. He stayed in his shop all day long. Sometimes, he would not see him for a few days. Muyu stood in front of Chun Erzwang's shop. His shop did not even have a signboard. Thinking about it, there was no need for a signboard. Everyone knew what kind of business he did. Besides, he was the only shop in this alley, so it was not difficult to find. There was a mighty statue of Zhong Kuei in front of Chun Erzwang's shop. It was made of paper. Old Sue even praised his paper figurine skills. The paper figurines he made were very lifelike and lifelike. This Zhong Kuei was very tall, about 5 meters tall. He glared at outsiders with his fierce tiger eyes, as if he could make all evil creatures avoid him. The peachwood sword in his hand was incomparably sharp. He killed all the villains in the world without mercy. The paint on the wooden door had already peeled off. It looked like it had been there for a long time and was severely worn. Muyu walked in. The shop was very dark. It was broad daylight, but it felt like the sun could not shine in. There was a faint moldy smell in the shop, mixed with the smell of incense and offerings. No one would like this place. Next to it was a wooden shelf. On it were bundles of paper money. At the top of the shelf were various kinds of incense. Some of them were even thicker than a thumb. On another shelf were white candles and stacks of yellow talisman paper. It was unknown what they were used for. Behind the shelf were 4 to 5 coffins. The lids of the coffins were half open, and the smell of wood was very strong, as if they had just been cut down. Many people might not like the smell of wood, but Muyu liked it very much. Some of these coffins were made of fir wood, while others were made of namu. There were a few beds beside the coffin, and a few people were lying on them. Could it be a dead person? For some reason, Muyu is a spirit-severing stage cultivator, and no one could hurt him with his spiritual energy. But when he saw this situation, he still felt a little creeped out. Normally, he wouldn't be afraid if he saw a dead person, but seeing a dead person in such a strange place, he always felt a knot in his heart. He thought that if he walked over and the dead person suddenly sat up, that feeling would definitely be unforgettable. However, Muyu soon discovered that it was not a dead person, but a person made of wood, because he felt the aura of camphor wood. These wooden men were wearing very new and gorgeous blue clothes. He suddenly understood what kind of clothes they were. Shroud. He had to say that these wooden men were quite lifelike. They were tall, fat, short, and thin ones. Their figures were similar to humans. They even had eyes, eyebrows, and hair. They were even colored and lifelike. If it weren't for the eyes that were not colored, Muyu could even treat them as real people. The wooden men were wearing shroud, probably for show. It was just that this scene was too strange. Muyu was sure that he didn't like it here. Tell me the details of the dead person. At this moment, a low and hoarse voice suddenly appeared behind Muyu. Muyu was shocked. He was a spirit-severing stage cultivator, but he didn't notice that someone was behind him. Muyu turned around and frowned at the person in front of him. When he entered the shop just now, he didn't feel that there was a living person in the shop. This guy seemed to appear out of thin air, which surprised him. Your name is Chun Erzwang, right? Sorry to disturb you. Muyu looked at Chun Erzwang. There was vitality flowing in his body. He didn't know if it was because he had been dealing with the dead for a long time, but his vitality didn't seem to be very strong. However, he was sure that he was a living person. Moreover, Muyu didn't feel any spiritual energy fluctuations from him. Tell me the details of the dead person. Do you want to bury him, or do you want to bury him? Chun Erzwang's face was blocked by the shadow. Sky Burial was buried in the chaotic burial valley. This was the name of the nearby villages. After that incident, do you still dare to do a sky burial? Muyu curiously asked. The matter of Old Man Zhao's moving corpse scared the simple villagers. According to Old Man Su, the nearby villages no longer dared to carry their deceased relatives to the chaotic burial valley. Although in their view, the chaotic burial valley was a crack leading to the next life, but since the moving corpse incident, everyone was worried that they would be brought in. So, they would rather bury their relatives and let them find their way to the underworld. Only you can choose whether to do it or not. It's not up to me to do it or not. Chun Erzwang's voice was very calm. It was so calm that it made people feel that it was unimaginable. It was as if Old Man Zhao's moving corpse incident didn't leave a shadow in his heart. Muyu raised his head and glanced around. Suddenly, he was startled. He actually saw under the dark beam of the shop. There was a coffin hanging in the air. Although this coffin was made of wood, Muyu didn't feel any wood aura from it. He could already control anything made of wood. He could make them take root and sprout, or forcibly change their shape. But he couldn't control the coffin hanging from a beam. This made him feel very strange. The strangest thing was, why would the coffin be hung from the beam of the shop? That coffin is a bit interesting. Muyu pointed at the coffin under the beam. His divine sense spread out. It disappeared like a stone sinking into the sea. There were no signs of life. There was also no special aura. It was as if it was an empty coffin. You're not here to do business. You don't have the smell of a dead person, but there is the smell of death. After Chun Erzwang finished speaking, he slowly turned around and walked towards the back of the shop. The smell of a dead person? The smell of death? Muyu was slightly stunned. He had the aura of death from the underworld grass on him. It was the purest aura of death in the world. How could Chun Erzwang detect it? This Chun Erzwang was probably not immortal. Wait, I have something to ask you. Muyu flashed and blocked in front of Chun Erzwang. Chun Erzwang saw Muyu suddenly appear in front of him, but he wasn't surprised. He didn't even move. You're a cultivator, Chun Erzwang said. Yes, I came to find you to investigate the matter of Old Master Zhao coming back from the dead. Muyu found that he couldn't see through Chun Erzwang. He didn't have any spirit energy fluctuations on him. He was undoubtedly immortal. But mortals would normally respectfully call cultivators immortal masters. They would also act in fear and trepidation. But Chun Erzwang didn't do that. Old Master Zhao's descendants were unfilial, so he took them all away. That's it. Chun Erzwang said simply. Muyu suddenly reached out and placed his hand on Chun Erzwang. His spirit energy instantly surged in. He frowned. Why aren't you cursed? Chun Erzwang didn't move when Muyu reached out his hand. He wasn't worried at all that Muyu would do to him. I've been in contact with the dead for a long time. Naturally, I won't be cursed by the dead. Muyu withdrew his hand. Chun Erzwang was undoubtedly a living person. Muyu's spirit energy couldn't enter his body. This meant that he wasn't a cultivator. This was very strange. Chun Erzwang's calm performance was very abnormal. It was impossible for mortals to be so calm in front of cultivators. But Chun Erzwang didn't even pant. You're not here to do business. Then please go back. I only do business with the dead. Chun Erzwang didn't even look at Muyu. Instead, he walked around Muyu and continued to walk towards the back of the shop. Muyu looked at Chun Erzwang's back and then at the coffin hanging from a beam. This time, he didn't say anything. Instead, he directly chose to leave this gloomy place. Little Shuai, did you notice anything wrong just now? Muyu didn't go too far. Instead, he stopped under a tree outside the village. Little Shuai wagged his tail and said, There's something strange everywhere. How can a living person live in such a gloomy place? Muyu didn't notice anything strange about Chun Erzwang. If he had to say something, it would be that Chun Erzwang didn't have any sinister formations cast on him like the other villagers. When facing him, Chun Erzwang still acted as if nothing had happened. This clearly didn't make sense. Why didn't you just use the soul wood to control him? Why didn't you just ask him what secrets he was hiding? Dragonvine's suggestion was very simple and crude. The soul wood is very harmful to people. Big earthworm, do you have any common sense? Little Shuai said, the soul wood was originally used to invade the nerves of the prey, to control them. If it was used on people casually, it would naturally be harmful. Especially for mortals who didn't have any cultivation, the harm would be even greater. Muyu hadn't figured out Chun Erzwang's situation yet, so he didn't want to do anything to him. Muyu shook his head. I don't think it's that simple. Although the hanging coffin doesn't look like anything, it's really strange. Who would hang a coffin on a roof beam? And ever since I walked into Chun Erzwang's shop, I felt as if there was a pair of eyes watching me in the dark. This feeling didn't come from Chun Erzwang, but from a dark corner. If there is someone behind Chun Erzwang, I can't alert them just in case. The feeling of being watched was faint. Muyu couldn't find the source of that feeling with his spirit-severing stage cultivation. It was very likely that the mysterious person behind it was no weaker than Muyu. Do you think there might be a dead person lying in that coffin? Little Shuai asked curiously. Why don't you go and take a look alone tonight? Dragonvine said. Little Shuai waved his hand. No, I don't like gloomy places. Why can't we just bask in the sun and eat barbecue? Why do we have to deal with the dead? Muyu didn't like Chun Erzwang's shop either. However, what he cared about more was that he felt that there were a lot of wood in Chun Erzwang's backyard. These were all newly cut, but they weren't used to make coffins. Instead, they were the same as the wooden people wearing shrouds in the shop. They were all camphor wood. He had never heard of camphor wood being used to make coffins, but there were wooden people in Chun Erzwang's shop. If these camphor wood were all used to make wooden people, then why did Chun Erzwang make so many wooden people? There were paper figurines used as servants in the underworld to be buried with them, but he had never heard of carving wooden people to be buried with them. Chapter 575. There were 4 workers in Chun Erzwang's backyard. They usually helped other people carry coffins. Naturally, this kind of work could only be done by uncouth people. These 4 workers were born with strong backs and waists of bears. Their muscles were dark, and they looked ordinary. If there was something wrong, it would be that at this moment, the 4 workers were doing fine work. Each worker was holding a carving knife and carving camphor wood into wooden figures. Their techniques were quite skilled. The yard was filled with wood shavings, rolling up and down, gently floating in the air. The strange thing was that the camphor wood was clearly just cut down, but when it was in their hands, the wood looked like it had been dried for a long time. The bark was peeled off very easily with no sense of jerkiness. Chun Erzwang, on the other hand, walked straight through the small courtyard and locked himself in his room. No one knew what he was doing. The other workers didn't ask about it either. They didn't even raise their heads when Chun Erzwang walked past them. They only focused on their own tasks. One of the workers had almost finished carving a wooden figure. This wooden figure was in the shape of an old woman. It was very old, with wrinkles piled up on her face and age spots. The vicissitudes of life at the corner of her eyes were also perfectly outlined. It was hard to imagine that a rough man could carve to this extent. His carving speed was not slow or fast, just like a girl embroidering. The carving knife in his hand was very dexterous. The wood shavings fell down, perfectly showing the other parts of the old woman's body. After spending about 2 hours, the old woman had taken shape. The shop assistant picked up the paintbrush next to him. What was shocking was that the paint on his paintbrush was red. And when the red paint brush landed on the wood golem's body, it actually changed into other colors. It changed into the color of the wood golem's skin, age, spots, eyebrows, lips, and even the color of its scars. One color changed into the various colors of a person, vividly showing the image of the old woman. The only thing that was puzzling was that the old woman's eyes were still the color of wood. There was no color, just like the wooden figures lying next to the coffins in the shop. Then the worker walked to the front of the shop and took out a shroud for the old woman to wear. Then he moved the old woman into the room that Chun Erzwang had just entered. Then he continued to move a camphor wood, peel it, and carve it. Mu Yu had cast an invisibility formation on himself and had been watching the 4 workers work from far above Chun Erzwang's backyard. The doubts in his heart grew deeper and deeper. Mu Yu had a feeling that there was a very powerful person guarding against him in Chun Erzwang's courtyard. That feeling was very strong just now, so Mu Yu did not rashly approach directly. He had been waiting for an opportunity to make his move. However, for the entire morning, the 4 workers were only there to carve. There was not even an extra expression on their faces. In the afternoon, a woman came to look for Chun Erzwang with a long face. She was a villager from a neighboring village, and her name was Xinghua. Her mother had passed away last night, and she came to look for Chun Erzwang to arrange her mother's funeral. There were more than a dozen small villages and 7 or 8 large villages nearby. The total population was more than 10,000 people. Chun Erzwang's family was the only one that dealt with dead people. Sometimes, Chun Erzwang wouldn't have a single customer in a month. Sometimes he would have to make several trips a day. Life was unpredictable, and Chun Erzwang knew this better than anyone else. Chun Erzwang expressionlessly helped Xinghua choose the utensils for the funeral. From incense sticks to coffins to shrouds, paper money, and even the dead to be buried with, everything was available. There were many funeral customs in rural areas, including what time to light the candles, how many incense sticks to light, when to call for the soul, and when to chase after the soul. Chun Erzwang knew all of these like the back of his hand. One of the advantages of doing funeral business was that the family of the deceased would not haggle with you over the price of the coffin and shrouds. The price would be as much as it should be. According to the birth characters, the funeral was set for the next day. Mu Yu had been paying attention to Chun Erzwang's movements, and he also saw those strange and lifelike wooden figures. These wooden figures carved from camphor wood were plants in the end, and could be controlled by Mu Yu. As long as Mu Yu was willing, he could even let these wooden figures move their muscles and bones, standing up and walking around a bit. Xiao Shui was more playful, and it had been encouraging Mu Yu to let the wooden figures dance or something. But considering the person in the dark, Mu Yu naturally refused. The red paint used to color the wooden figures exuded a rotten and moldy smell. It was unknown what it was made of, but the smell was very strong. This kind of paint could automatically change into the color of the human body when it came into contact with the wooden figures. Such a strange scene was definitely not something that mortals could do. Mu Yu had just gone back and asked Old Su. In the past, the villagers only knew that Chun Erzwang was good at making paper figurines. They didn't know that he could also carve wooden figures, let alone his 4 rough men. His 4 men were from the nearby villages, and they were all men who did rough work. He had never heard of them being able to carve such fine work. It seemed as if Chun Erzwang and his 4 men had suddenly become master carvers in a short period of time. Old Su also told Muyu with certainty that he had never heard of anyone using wooden figures during a funeral. Muyu became more and more curious about Chen Erzwang's strange behavior, but Chen Erzwang stayed in his room and didn't come out. Only when the men finished carving a wooden figure and sent it to Chen Erzwang's room, the door of Chen Erzwang's room was closed for the rest of the time. After monitoring for an entire day, Muyu still didn't find anything. Early the next morning, Chen Erzwang and his 4 men had already carried an empty coffin to Xinghua's house. The sacrificial candles and other offerings were placed in the empty coffin. After they left, the dangerous aura in Chen Erzwang's courtyard gradually disappeared, which made Muyu feel very strange. It was as if this strange aura had followed Chen Erzwang and left. But Muyu had interacted with Chen Erzwang that day and didn't find anything strange about him. Muyu sneaked into the backyard, and the unfinished wooden figures were still placed in the backyard. In the corner of the courtyard, the trunks of the camphor trees were piled up, and next to it, there was a large dye vat filled with red pigment. A pungent, rotten smell assailed his nostrils. What the hell are these things made of? Did someone vomit last night's meal? Little Shuai pinched his nose and asked in disgust. Muyu also couldn't stand this strange smell, so he took a long spoon, scooped up a spoonful, and held it in front of his eyes to examine. This was very strange, and if there was an outsider, they would feel that Muyu's actions were as if he wanted to taste this disgusting thing. Little mouse, why don't you try it? You eat everything anyway. Long Tongue suggested. Big earthworm, your taste is heavy, you should try it. When little Shuai said this, he didn't open his mouth, but gathered his voice in everyone's mind. Muyu shook it a bit and wrapped the red pigment with his spiritual power. In the past, when he followed Dead Tree to learn the poison scripture, his ability to smell pills and recognize prescriptions was very strong, and it also allowed him to defeat many young alchemists of the Danding sect. Every substance produced a different fluctuation of spiritual power, and according to this difference, he could distinguish the type and dosage of each herb. But when Muyu wrapped the red pigment with his spiritual power, he was surprised to find that this red pigment wasn't made of anything complicated at all, only an unknown substance. Muyu had never encountered this kind of thing before, and the fluctuation of spiritual power it produced was very strange to Muyu. Strange? What the hell is this thing? Muyu was familiar with the fluctuation of spiritual power produced by all kinds of monster blood, heart powder, plant roots, pollen, and so on, but he couldn't determine what this disgusting thing was made of. No matter what it is, can we not hold the spoon so close? Little Shuai kept drilling into Muyu's clothes, wanting to get away from this disgusting thing. This smell filled the whole yard, but the 4 workers didn't even frown when they were carving. Their concentration was also very strong. Muyu put the spoon back, walked through the yard full of wood shavings, and walked towards Chen Erzwang's room. Chen Erzwang stayed here during the day, and after the workers finished carving the statues, they also moved them to this room. Muyu looked at the wood shavings and camphor trees in the yard, and saw that they had carved at least a dozen wooden figures. A dozen wooden figures in this room, and it's not crowded. Muyu pushed open the door and walked into the room. When he saw the scene in the room, he was slightly startled. There was only a bed in the room and nothing else. Little Shuai also poked his head out and sniffed. He wagged his tail and said, Muyu, I seem to smell something similar to the smell of chaotic Burial Valley. Muyu also noticed something strange. This room seemed to be filled with the special in-chi of chaotic Burial Valley, but this in-chi was vague, and he couldn't tell where it came from. The strangest thing was that this in-chi seemed to be able to disturb his perception. He couldn't use his ability to control would to sense the whereabouts of the wooden figures. Where did those wooden figures go? He remembered that the 4 workers had clearly finished carving the wooden figures, painted them, and then moved them into this room. However, the whole room was empty. There were no wooden figures, and other than a bed and a blanket, there wasn't even any basic furniture. Muyu looked around, but still couldn't find any trace of the wooden figures. He looked at the bed that could fit 2 people. The bed was also made of camphor wood, and the edge of the bed was very low. The bedsheet hung down to the ground, covering the situation under the bed. Perhaps it was because the door was opened, but a cold wind blew at the bedsheet. It looked like someone was teasing the bedsheet under the bed. Don't tell me those wooden figures are hiding under the bed, little Shuai muttered. Muyu couldn't be sure, but it didn't make sense to hide more than 10 wooden figures under the bed. At most, 2 or 3 would be enough. After all, those wooden figures were about the same size as a real person. He slowly walked to the side of the bed and squatted down. He slowly lifted the bedsheet and looked under the bed. There was only a toolbox without a lid under the bed and 2 pairs of cloth shoes. Other than that, there was nothing else. The wooden figures weren't under the bed either. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. Muyu pulled out the toolbox. There were only ordinary planing knives and carving knives in the toolbox. They looked very new, as if they had just been bought. Muyu, who didn't feel the existence of the formation either, Dragon Tongue asked. Muyu shook his head. If there really was a formation here, it wouldn't be able to hide it from him, the leader of the formation glyph sect. That mysterious guy had set up a mind-loss formation in all the villagers. This mind-loss formation wasn't even worth mentioning in front of Muyu. Muyu could also confirm that the other party's formation skills weren't very high. They were only slightly better than the Zhongtian disciples of the formation faction. Chun Erzwang was a mortal, so where did he move those wooden figures to? Could there be some secret mechanism or something? Those wooden figures might have been hidden somewhere else. Little Shuai said. Muyu looked around. This kind of house was independent, so there couldn't be any secret compartments. Even if there were, there couldn't be so many wooden figures underground. He spread his spirit energy underground and found that the ground was just hard ground. Creak, creak, a gust of wind blew in from outside the house. Suddenly, there was a creepy creaking sound coming from inside the house. Chapter 576. Those missing wooden men were actually hanging from the beams. Oh my God! Little Shuai shrank back into Muyu's clothes. These wooden men were carved too well, especially after they were painted. If one didn't look at the wooden eyes, they were no different from real people. Each wooden man had a hemp rope around their neck, hanging freely for meters off the ground. The other end of the hemp rope was firmly tied to the beam. The creaking sound came from the friction between the hemp rope and the beam. At first glance, these wooden men really did look like they were hanging from the beam. Muyu calmed himself down. He felt that he would rather fight a few hundred rounds with the Gate of Hell than see this strange scene. Even when he was in the Sand Eagle Demonic King's underground palace, he was not this nervous when facing so many Yin corpses. This was because he knew where the Yin corpses came from. According to Little Shuai's words, the Yin corpses were a bit cute, but these wooden men did not play according to common sense. They were just hanging above his head, gently swinging back and forth, but Muyu did not notice them when he came in. This house was built with old-style beams. The roof was very high. The wooden men were also very high, for meters off the ground. When Muyu came in, he was only focused on looking around the room. He did not notice the strangeness on the beam. When he raised his head, he saw several people wearing shrouds swaying. This scene was truly shocking. Little mouse, you're too cowardly. A few wooden men can scare you like this. You're really useless. Dragonvine mocked. There's nothing good to eat here. Of course I'm cowardly. Little Shuai muttered. When Little Shuai met Yin corpses and spirits before, he was very brave. That was because there were array bases and other delicious things that attracted him. The temptation of delicious food made Little Shuai fearless. But there was nothing to eat here, so Little Shuai could not muster up his courage. Muyu was also scared. He cursed out, "Fuck, is this a prank?" Hanging the wooden men on the beam. He'll look at them when he sleeps at night. Won't he have nightmares? He thought that he was very brave and had seen many strange things. What dead people, Yin corpses, and souls. However, this was the first time he had encountered such a strange situation where a wooden man was hung from a beam. Strange, these people don't have the aura of wood. Muyu, didn't you notice? Dragonvine asked curiously. With Long Tongue's reminder, Muyu immediately came to a realization. No wonder he didn't find the wooden man when he first came in. So this was the reason. The wooden figure no longer had the characteristics of a wooden figure. Muyu floated up in a flash and stopped beside the wooden men. All the wooden figures swayed slightly, but did not collide with each other. He touched the arm of a young woman with a pale face. The statue of the young woman looked sickly, but it was still made of wood. However, there was a strange life force in the wood, as if it was about to come alive. This strange life force covered up the aura of the wood, making them look less like wood. Muyu could clearly feel that this life force came from the hemp rope around their necks, but the other end of the hemp rope was not connected to anything strange. This meant that the hemp rope itself was strange. Muyu looked carefully and found that it was not a hemp rope, but a yellow material that he had never seen before. It was not a plant, but there was an unknown life force flowing through it. There is no ladder in this room. How would a mortal like Chun Erzwang hang them up? Muyu curiously wandered around the wooden men, trying to find something unusual about them. Unfortunately, the wooden men didn't have anything special about them other than floating in the air. But at this time, Muyu actually saw a familiar wooden man. Old Su, why is the old man's statue here? Muyu was extremely shocked. If it wasn't for the fact that the wooden man's eyes were not colored, he would have thought that Old Su was hanging here. Muyu originally thought that these wooden men were randomly carved, but now it seemed that this was not the case. He looked at all the wooden men again and found that other than the pale-faced young woman that he had just touched, the rest of the wooden men were old men and old women. They looked like they already had one foot in the coffin. Most importantly, Muyu found that the old woman with age spots that one of the workers had carved in the afternoon was gone. Wait, these people can't be dying, right? Muyu guessed in his heart. He then shook the complaining coward in his arms. Little Handsome, how long do you think the old man who received us can live? Little Handsome was like the king of hell. If he said that someone would die, that person would not be able to live. However, Muyu had warned him before not to say that someone was dying, so Little Handsome basically did not say much. That old man who called me a little mouse? He should die tomorrow evening. His body is very weak, so he can only hold on until then, Little Handsome said unhappily. He was still holding a grudge against Old Su. What illness does he have? Muyu did not notice Old Su's problem at first. At that time, he only cared about breaking the heart loss array in Old Su's body and did not care about anything else. He thought that Old Su's life force was still very strong. It's not an illness. He should have lived well, at least 10 more years, right? But that array is the heart loss array. Didn't you notice? It sucked that guy's life force, Little Handsome said. Muyu frowned. At that time, he felt that the array pattern of the heart loss array was different, but he did not care. Now it seemed that he had overlooked something. When he came to Old Su's statue, he found that the wooden man in front of him was becoming more and more lifelike. Its chest was rising and falling. Old Su's wooden man was breathing. Is it coming back to life? Muyu felt that things were getting more and more inconceivable. When he checked Old Su's body, he did not notice anything strange. Wait, I seem to remember this phenomenon. Let me think. Little Handsome stuck his head out, stretched out a claw, and gently poked Old Su's arm. Suddenly, he showed a surprised expression. What's the matter? Muyu asked. I know, this is no longer an array, but a very special kind of goo. I remember seeing it somewhere. Anyway, I can't explain it clearly. The heart loss array is only used to activate the goo. Goo is different from array. After the goo is activated, the heart loss array is dispensable. Even I misjudged it at that time. Little Handsome was a little surprised. Goo. Muyu remembered hearing his master talk about this kind of thing before. This kind of thing was like cultivating a goo in a person's body. It was used to punish a person and make them obedient. Otherwise, they would not be able to live and would not be able to die. However, Muyu did not know the details. He had never experienced the goo. This goo is to transfer Old Su's life force to this wooden man. Little Handsome said seriously as he stretched out his hand and pulled Old Su's face. You're saying that this wooden man will come to life and then the old man will die? Muyu was quite angry. He was always grateful to kind people. Although Old Su's way of speaking made people not know whether to laugh or cry, he was a warm and kind person. Muyu could not watch him die without knowing why. Little Handsome tilted his head and thought for a while before saying, "I don't know. I feel that this wooden man's function is to replace the old man and then hide something. I'm not very sure. I also don't know how to remove this goo. Hide something? Wait, I feel that something is wrong." Muyu remembered that old man Su had said that old man Zhao didn't kill everyone. Instead, he said something like, "I'll wait for the day you die before I come back to welcome each and every one of you and your descendants." Could this be the reason why he didn't kill the others? To take the lives of the villagers in another way? Old Zhao naturally died of old age. After he was sent to Disorderly Burial Valley, he ran out and took away his descendants. And if that guy wanted to take away other people and their descendants, he had to wait for them to die? Could it be that the guy could not take the souls of those who died of natural causes? So he thought of another way to hasten the deaths of these people. Muyu felt a chill in his heart. This method was somewhat similar to the methods of the people from the Gate of Hell. When he was still imprisoned in the valley, he followed Deadwood Daddy out to treat the mortals who were infected with the plague. Later, he found out that the plague was deliberately spread by the people from the Gate of Hell to collect the souls of those who died of natural causes, to refine the 9 formations of possession to deal with the White Ape Demon King. Did this guy who came out of nowhere and wanted to obtain the third sky also want to collect the souls of those who died of natural causes to refine something strange? No, we have to find a way to stop this. It seems that they carved these wooden men to transfer the lives of the villagers to the wooden men and create the illusion that the villagers died of natural causes. Muyu clenched his fist. "By the way, Muyu, there's a coffin hanging from the beam in front of us. Do you think we should go and see if there's anything strange about it?" Dragonvine reminded him. "Damn it, big earthworm. Do you have to go against coffins?" Xiao Shuai cursed. It seemed that he didn't like those things. But Muyu had already landed, closed the door, and walked to the front yard. Chen Erzwang had already gone to attend someone else's funeral, so the shop door was closed. Muyu walked into the shop from the yard and found that the shop was very dark. There was not a single ray of light. The shop was no different from yesterday. The strange coffin was still hanging from the beam by a rope. The shadow clone sword in Muyu's hand lit up with a green light, illuminating the whole room even more eerie. He carefully landed beside the coffin and slowly slid it open. With the help of the shadow clone sword's green light, he looked inside the coffin. There was an old man with a face full of wrinkles lying inside. Muyu carefully sized up the old man in front of him. He naturally didn't recognize this dead person, but when he shifted his gaze to the old man's right hand, he found that the old man only had 4 fingers. Wait, his right hand only has 4 fingers. I remember old Su said that old Master Zhao also only had 4 fingers on his left hand. This is old Master Zhao? Muyu exclaimed. The shadow clone sword's light shone on old Master Zhao's face, making it look even more pale green. Muyu didn't understand why old Master Zhao's body was here, but he suddenly heard a breath. It actually came from old Master Zhao's body. Chapter 577. In a gloomy coffin shop, it was already strange to find a coffin with a dead person inside. Which coffin shop would sell a coffin with a dead person as a gift? Not to mention that this dead person didn't seem to be completely dead. Xiao Shuai tried to burrow into Muyu's clothes, leaving only half of his head outside. "He's still alive?" Long Tongue stood on Muyu's shoulder and said in surprise. He was much braver than Xiao Shuai. Muyu shook his head and said, "There's no vitality in his body. There's only Yin Qi supporting him. He should be dead." Muyu was the most knowledgeable person when it came to sensing vitality. He knew how death manifested in a person's body. The loss of vitality couldn't be hidden from Muyu's eyes. Muyu looked at old Master Zhao's whole body, trying to find something special. Old Master Zhao was very old. The wrinkles on his face were like a puddle of mud. He even had a few strands of beard. The shroud he was wearing was very new. It was probably the only new clothes he wore in his old age. Other than the slight rise and fall of his chest, there was nothing unusual about him. "Muyu, don't tell me you want to take off his shroud?" Xiao Shuai asked in disdain. Muyu ignored Xiao Shuai. He didn't understand why Chun Erzwang would place old Master Zhao's body in his shop. Why was it so strange for a shop that dealt with dead people to place a dead person there? He carefully moved old Master Zhao's neck. Suddenly, he saw two sharp, bloody holes behind old Master Zhao's ears. It looked like he was bitten by some demon beast. The blood on the wounds hadn't coagulated yet. Xiao Shuai, can you see what bit him? Mu Yu asked. Xiao Shuai looked over in disgust and carefully examined it. Can you use the night luminescent pearl? You have to use the green light of the shadow splitting sword. It's so scary. Mu Yu laughed and quickly took out the night luminescent pearl. The soft white light suddenly illuminated the gloomy coffin and dispersed the green light. Xiao Shuai carefully stared at the wound and made a soft sound of surprise. Then it stretched out its little paw and pressed old Master Zhao's forehead. Suddenly, it retracted its paw and frowned. What's wrong? Mu Yu asked curiously. How disgusting. This old man has no brain. Little Handsome said in a huff. Can you have some conscience? He's already dead, and you're still scolding him? Long Tongue scolded. I mean, this old man's brain was eaten by something. After that thing eats the old man's brain, it becomes like the old man's brain. It can control the old man's every word and action. Xiao Shuai rubbed its claws against Mu Yu's body. In the past, Xiao Shuai had never complained when it went to look for demon spirits in the stomach of demonic beasts. Now, it even had to wipe its hands when it touched a dead person. Xiao Shuai didn't even know when it had developed a mysophobia. How can it be such a disgusting thing? Mu Yu also found it hard to accept. Eating people's brains alive and then controlling them? What kind of demonic beast was this? Can we leave this place? Xiao Shuai shrank into Mu Yu's embrace. Other than eating things that could make him bravely move forward, Xiao Shuai had no interest in dead people. Xiao Shuai, do you know what kind of demonic beast it is? Mu Yu had never heard of something that could control people by eating their brains. I forgot. I feel that it's very familiar, like I've seen it somewhere before, but I can't remember. Xiao Shuai mumbled. Mu Yu carefully searched the surroundings, but still didn't find anything strange in the shop. He remembered that Chun Erzwang was going to arrange a funeral in the neighboring village. He felt that he had to go and see what was going on. Xiao Shuai didn't like to attend a funeral for the dead, but Long Tongue told it that there would be a lot of good food at the funeral. So Xiao Shuai immediately became excited. Using an invisibility array, Mu Yu hid in the sky above the village. It was easy to find where the funeral was going to be held. Because paper money was floating in the sky, mourning music and crying sound were everywhere. It was impossible not to notice. When Mu Yu arrived, the family was preparing for the funeral. He immediately saw Chun Erzwang walking at the front of the procession. At this moment, Chun Erzwang's face was very solemn, and there was even a hint of sadness. This was his professional expression. Old Su had once said that he had never seen Chun Erzwang smile. Chun Erzwang's body emitted a faint yin qi, which was exactly the same as the aura in Mass Burial Valley. Mu Yu didn't notice this aura when he went to his shop last time. It seemed that the mysterious fellow was most likely hiding in Chun Erzwang's body. There weren't many people attending the funeral, only about 70 to 80 people. Patriarch Zhao's seniority required the entire village to attend his funeral. Although Xing Hua's mother wasn't as old as Patriarch Zhao, the procession was still very long. Ever since Patriarch Zhao's incident, the nearby villagers no longer dared to carry out sky burials for their loved ones. Instead, they buried them in the mountains. The hillside wasn't very high. Normally, the villagers would bury their loved ones in their fields on the mountain. The funeral lasted about 4 hours. Xiao Shuai kept scolding Long Tongue for being a liar. It didn't see anything delicious, only some offerings that Xiao Shuai didn't care about at all. Mu Yu kept an eye on Chun Erzwang's movements, but Chun Erzwang didn't do anything. He only did what he was supposed to do and said what he was supposed to say. He didn't make any extra movements. Even when the coffin was being buried, he didn't go forward to help. He only let his 4 workers do the work. The 4 workers didn't do anything else. They just picked up the shovel and filled in the soil. That was all. Then, Chun Erzwang called his workers down the mountain and returned home, leaving the crying family members to stay for a while longer. Do you feel that something is wrong? Long Tongue asked. Muyu shook her head. She was afraid that the biggest problem was that she didn't find anything wrong. He followed Chun Erzwang back to the shop. The four workers silently walked in the backyard and continued to carve the wooden figurines. Chun Erzwang also locked himself in his room. He really didn't know why he was alone with so many lifelike wooden figurines in the room. Was he just staring at each other? However, after they returned to the shop, the aura mysteriously disappeared. Muyu pondered for a long time. In the end, he decided to go back and check on Old Su's situation. After all, according to Xiao Shuai's death announcement, Old Su didn't have long to live. Old Su was still diligently working in the field. When Muyu called him, he hurriedly threw down his hoe and ran over. Sir, what's the hurry? Old Su was full of smiles. He was hale and hearty, and didn't look like he was going to die tomorrow evening. Muyu looked at Old Su and didn't find anything wrong with him. Xiao Shuai said that the evil witchcraft transferred Old Su's life force to the wooden figurines. However, Muyu found that Old Su's life force was still very strong. What was going on? Uncle, are you okay? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Muyu asked worriedly. Old Su smiled honestly and said, I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere. However, my rheumatism is acting up again. It's an old problem. I'll get used to it. Muyu looked at the sky and said, Uncle, don't work today. I'll check your body when we go back. Old Su was flattered when he heard this. He hurriedly said, Oh, okay. Thank you, Sir Muyu. Although he didn't understand why the immortal master suddenly wanted to check his body, Old Su quickly ran to pick up the hoe and proudly followed Muyu back. Along the way, he saw other villagers with their heads held high. Old Su was very beautiful when he walked with the immortal master. Xiao Shuai, are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Muyu carefully checked Old Su's body. He found that other than the common rheumatism and shortness of breath caused by smoking tobacco, there was nothing abnormal. Muyu still didn't see any signs of life loss in Old Su's body. His life force and the wooden figurines are of the same origin. This is a very common situation in witchcraft. Basically, you can't see any signs before the outbreak. However, once the outbreak happens, you can't do anything. Xiao Shuai said seriously. Old Su, who was next to him, was confused. He asked in a low voice, Lord Muyu, is my rheumatism okay? It's okay, but you're going to die soon. Xiao Shuai said simply. Old Su's face turned pale. He asked nervously, Sir Muyu, am I going to die? Muyu glared at Xiao Shuai and hurriedly comforted him. Don't worry, uncle. Don't listen to his nonsense. I'll help you cure your rheumatism. Since he met Old Su, Muyu might as well be a good person until the end. Rheumatism was a disease that tormented many old people, but for Muyu, it was just a simple matter of massage. Because the meridians of mortals couldn't directly bear spiritual energy, Muyu used a few small wooden needles to pierce into Old Su's knees. Then, he used the needles as a guide to guide his spiritual energy into Old Su's body to remove the moisture. Sir Muyu personally treated me. I must have accumulated a lot of good karma in my previous life. Huh, Old Su whispered happily. It's good that you're fine. Don't smoke tobacco in the future. It's not good for your lungs. Muyu used the wooden needles to pierce into Old Su's chest. He let the wooden needles extend their roots in Old Su's body to absorb all the harmful substances that couldn't be expelled from Old Su's lungs. Then, he used the wooden needles to expel them. This was the best he could do. Xiao Shuai's death announcement had never been wrong. Right now, he wasn't sure how to deal with it. He hadn't found the cause of the disease, so he couldn't treat it. After Muyu massaged him, Old Su jumped a few times and found that the soreness that had troubled him for many years had disappeared. He took a few deep breaths and found that his chest tightness and shortness of breath had also disappeared. His face immediately lit up and he walked with wind. It was already late, so Old Su quickly ran to cook. His wife died early, and his only daughter was married to a neighboring village. Thus, he lived alone. In order to show that his legs were flexible, He ran all the way to the dishes, as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know that his rheumatism was cured. I still have a chicken stewing in the pot. Wait a moment. It'll be ready in a moment. Old man, Sue brought out a few dishes. Xiao Shuai was the one who ate the most happily. Anyway, he had never rejected food. Only Mu Yu had no appetite. He thought that he had to find a way to lure out the mysterious guy behind Chun Erzwang. That guy could eat other people's brains. It was disgusting no matter how he thought about it. Master Mu Yu, please eat quickly. If it's not enough, I'll make more. Old Su sat opposite Mu Yu and said, Uncle, can you recall in detail the day when old Master Zhao climbed out of the coffin? Was there any other strange places around Mass Burial Valley? Oh no, Sky Burial Valley? For example, smells, sounds, etc. Mu Yu knew too little about the mysterious guy. He had no idea how to deal with him. Let me think. Sounds? It didn't seem to be anything special. Maybe there was something rumbling under the Sky Burial Valley, and I thought it was thunder and lightning. Smells? Oh yes, there was a very unpleasant, musty smell. It was nauseating, Old Su said. Chapter 578. What's with the thunder and lightning? Are you going to be struck by lightning after you die? Xiao Shuai asked curiously. Xiao Shuai, don't interrupt. Uncle, please continue, Mu Yu said. Yes, it's the sound of thunder and lightning. It's more like the sound of thunder rolling in the clouds. The ground was shaking at the time. Because the Sky Burial Valley is a very strange place, we often hear all kinds of strange rumbling sounds. Rumor has it that the King of Hell is opening the gate to the underworld to welcome the resentful souls of the dead. Everyone is used to it, so we don't care about it. Old Su said with his head tilted. Sky Burial Valley has that kind of rumbling sound very often. Mu Yu felt that things were getting more and more strange. Throwing a coffin into Sky Burial Valley with lightning and sparks all the way, what was going on? Mu Yu went down a few days ago to take a look, but he didn't find anything. Could it be that they didn't go to the same place? Not very often. Anyway, every time a dead person was sent to the Sky Burial Valley, there would be thunder and lightning at the bottom of the valley. We didn't think it was normal. But when old Zhao was sent in, the rumbling sound was especially loud, Old Su said with certainty. What kind of place was the chaotic burial valley? This made Mu Yu very puzzled. For a long time, the villagers in the vicinity had thrown their coffins directly into the mass burial valley. However, not only did Mu Yu not find a single person at the bottom of the valley, he didn't even find a ghost, let alone lightning and thunder. Could it be that only the dead could cause such a change in Sky Burial Valley? What's the problem? Mu Yu held his chin. He thought it had something to do with the people from the Gate of Hell, but he couldn't find any traces of the people from the Gate of Hell. He also didn't know who the mysterious person behind Chun Erzwang was, so he didn't know where to start. Who cares what the problem is? You'll only have the strength to work when you're full. Xiao Shuai ate happily. Old Su pushed all the meat to Xiao Shuai, as he didn't want to neglect his immortal pet. Anyway, none of us dare to go to Sky Burial Valley anymore. None of us have thought about old Zhao's matter. Old man Su was talking excitedly, but then he suddenly stopped. His body swayed twice, and then he fell under the chair with a paw sound. Mu Yu was caught off guard by this sudden turn of events. Mu Yu immediately rushed over and helped old man Su up and anxiously asked, Uncle, are you all right? Old man Su's face was flushed red, as if he was choked by something, but there was nothing on his neck. I feel terrible. It feels like someone is strangling my neck. Old man Su took a long time to say these words. Soon after, his breathing became weak, and he found it difficult to breathe. Woodman's goo technique took effect on him. Little Shuai swallowed the last mouthful of meat, not feeling surprised at all. Mu Yu was shocked. He thought of the hanging woodman in Chun Erzwang's shop. Could it be like what little Shuai said, that old man Su's life had been transferred to the woodman? Mu Yu put old man Su on the bed. Little Shuai jumped on old man Su's chest and knocked on it. After listening for a while, he said seriously to Mu Yu, You see, I already said that this kind of goo technique is very evil and impossible to guard against. I will die. Old man Su asked in horror. He was out of breath when he spoke and the wrinkles on his face were all wrinkled. "Don't worry, you won't die now," Little Shuai said seriously. Old Man Su's face had just relaxed when Little Shuai added, "You won't die until tomorrow evening." Old Man Su's eyes widened. He was completely frightened. "Little Shuai, don't talk nonsense." "Uncle, don't worry, I won't let you die." Muyu pulled Little Shuai's tail to stop him from saying such unpleasant things. This guy just couldn't control his mouth. He was always saying such depressing things. Old Man Su's breath was getting weaker and weaker. At this time, Muyu also felt that Old Man Su's life force was slowly disappearing. "He looks like he's being hung up. If we want to save him, do we have to go to Chun Erzwang's shop and cut off the woodmen's necks?" Dragonvine guessed. "It's useless. Cutting it off might just make his face less red. He'll still die tomorrow evening." Little Shuai shook his head. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's cut the rope first so that he won't be in so much pain." Muyu turned around and walked towards Chun Erzwang's house. But Little Shuai said, Wait, I have a way to temporarily relieve his pain." "Old man, you're lucky to have met me. Endure the pain, it'll be over soon." Little Shuai stretched out his little hand. A thin and sharp claw appeared on his little finger. Although this claw looked very thin, it was very sharp. Usually, it was used to cut the armor of demonic beasts or to cut food to cook. Other than that, it basically didn't need to use it. One of his sharp claws gently reached into Old Man Su's throat without any resistance. This claw was thin and sharp. A mortal skin was not worth mentioning in front of it. It was easily penetrated. At the same time, a circle of white light appeared on Little Shuai's claw and enveloped Old Man Su's throat. Hiss! Old Man Su took a deep breath. The redness on his face gradually faded. He then sat up and gasped for breath. Thank you, Lord," Old Man Su said gratefully. "Hey, you have to thank me." Little Shuai had already retracted his claws and jumped back to Muyu's shoulder. "Thank you, Lord Little Shuai," Old Man Su quickly said. Although Old Man Su was no longer in pain, his breath was still very weak. His life force was still gradually fading away. Muyu looked at the circle of white light around Old Man Su's neck. He knew that Little Shuai's actions were not a long-term solution. If he wanted to save Old Man Su and the villagers who were about to lose their lives, he had to bring the person behind Chun Erzwang to justice. "Uncle, you rest here. Before we come back, don't go anywhere." Muyu had already rushed out of Old Man Su's house and flew towards Chun Erzwang's shop. At this moment, the sky had already darkened. Every household had lit up their lanterns. But when Muyu stopped in the air above Chun Erzwang's courtyard, he discovered that Chun Erzwang's house did not have any light. Although the moon was hanging on the treetops, it did not seem to shine on this small courtyard that sold dead people's things. Chun Erzwang's courtyard did not have any light at all. On the contrary, it was shrouded in a gloomy aura that made people feel cold. Muyu landed on the roof of Chun Erzwang's house during the day. Under his feet, there were many wooden figures hanging from the roof beam. Little Shuai had already retreated into Muyu's clothes. He had poked 2 small holes in Muyu's clothes, revealing 2 small eyes. The surroundings were very quiet. Even the chirping of crickets could not be heard. The wind blew over, causing Muyu's clothes to flutter. Muyu looked at the empty courtyard. There were still fragments of camphor wood in the courtyard. There were also some unfinished wooden figures. But the 4 workers had disappeared. A pungent, musty smell came from the corner of the courtyard. It was the disgusting paint used to paint the wooden figures. Muyu had already silently floated down and landed outside Chun Erzwang's door. He extended his runes and carefully listened to the movements in the surroundings. At the same time, he focused all his attention on Chun Erzwang's room. There was no sound in the room. Chun Erzwang was just a mortal. If he was resting, there should at least be the sound of his breathing. But Muyu did not hear any rhythmic sound. He carefully opened the door and found that the door was not locked. This was the second time he had come to this room. To be honest, he and Little Shuai did not like to come to this kind of gloomy place in the middle of the night. But at this time, for the sake of Old Man Su and the other villagers' lives, he had to think of a way to solve all of this. He looked through the crack in the door. It was pitch black inside, and he could not see the situation clearly. Just as he was about to push the door open, a pair of eyes suddenly appeared in the crack in the door. The pair of eyes in the darkness flashed with a cold light. It appeared so suddenly that Mu Yu did not expect it. This was because he did not sense any life in the room from the beginning. Fuck your mother. Little Shuai had originally made 2 holes in Mu Yu's clothes to reveal his little eyes. He did not expect to directly meet the pair of eyes in the crack in Chun Erzwang's door. He was so scared that his hair stood on end. Mu Yu's shadow clone sword was placed horizontally in front of his chest. With a burst of green light, he retreated and landed next to the unfinished wooden figure in the courtyard. He vigilantly looked at Chun Erzwang's room. At the same time, he felt that the courtyard was suddenly enveloped by a layer of gloomy aura. This aura was very strong and even made him smell a trace of danger. Creak! The door to Chun Erzwang's room was opened, and a figure slowly walked out. With the help of the green light on the shadow clone sword, Mu Yu saw the figure in front of him clearly. His pupils shrank. It was actually Old Man Zhao, who was lying in the coffin in the shop in front of him. At this moment, Old Man Zhao revealed a strange smile. His eyes were very cold and revealed a killing intent. It was completely unlike the eyes of an old man with 1 foot in the grave. What are you? Why do you want to harm the innocent villagers here? Mu Yu asked in a low voice. He quickly thought in his heart because he did not feel any human aura from the other party. There was no vitality, no fluctuation of cultivation, nothing at all. It was as if the Old Man Zhao in front of him was a walking corpse. Jiejia, Jiejia. Old Man Zhao slowly raised his foot and stepped out of the room. He staggered toward Mu Yu. He did not speak, but his mouth revealed a strange laughter that sounded very gloomy. Mu Yu only felt the cold, killing intent from the other party, but it did not give him a sense of danger. The real danger came from something in the darkness that was waiting for an opportunity to move, not from the person in front of him who had come back from the dead. He did not make the first move. He wanted to figure out the situation first. However, Old Man Zhao suddenly took out a file and slowly stabbed toward Mu Yu. The file was used to grind wood and was not very sharp. Mu Yu slanted his body and easily dodged the attack. This old Master Zhao's movements were too slow. Although his eyes were fierce, his moves were as light as a feather. He was no different from an ordinary person. He felt that an ordinary young man would be able to dodge this attack. What was going on? Old Man Zhao missed his stab and almost fell to the ground. However, he did not give up. He still laughed strangely and shakily stabbed at Mu Yu with the file. He is completely an ordinary person. That mysterious guy can't be so weak, right? Mu Yu, a spirit-severing stage cultivator, felt that it was very funny to confront Old Man Zhao. He felt that he could easily deal with this guy with a shake of his hand. However, because the other party was immortal, he did not use too much strength. He just slapped the back of Old Man Zhao's neck, trying to make him faint. However, Old Man Zhao was only slapped to the ground by Mu Yu. There was no sign of him fainting at all. He slowly got up and persevered to walk toward Mu Yu. Forget it. He is just a mortal. Mu Yu did not want to be entangled with Old Man Zhao. He came here to take down the wooden figures from the beam. He tiptoed and rushed into Chun Erzwang's room. The shadow clone sword had illuminated the entire room. Mu Yu raised his head, but the beam was already empty. Chapter 579. Those lifelike wooden dolls were clearly hanging from the beams during the day, but when Mu Yu came at night, these wooden dolls had disappeared without a trace. An inexplicable cold air suddenly came from the room. It was as if the temperature had suddenly dropped below 0, and the ground under his feet was starting to frost. Ever since Mu Yu came here, he felt that something was wrong with the courtyard. In the darkness, there was a powerful aura that was not weaker than his staring at him. When he walked into the room, that aura became more and more obvious, and it seemed to be very close to him. It was right behind him. Chi! Mu Yu's shadow clone sword suddenly stabbed behind him. The shadow clone sword seemed to have stabbed into someone's body, giving off a strange muffled sound. He turned his head to look and met Old Master Zhao's old face. His shadow clone sword had already stabbed into Old Master Zhao's chest. Muyu was shocked. He hurriedly pulled back his sword and dodged to the door. But the door automatically closed with a pung sound. The sharp sword energy crisscrossed and slashed at the door. It was reasonable to say that his sword chi was very tyrannical. This ordinary door should not be able to stop him at all. He did not even need to touch it before it was turned into dust. However, an even more tyrannical aura suddenly surged out from the darkness, blocking Mu Yu's sword chi. Mu Yu was actually blocked by an ordinary door. He turned around and looked at Old Master Zhao, who had suddenly appeared behind him. He was very puzzled. When Old Master Zhao attacked him, his speed was clearly as slow as a turtle. So how did he suddenly appear behind him? Old Master Zhao was wearing shrouds. There was a bloody hole in his chest, but there was no blood flowing out. He did not even frown. He still swayed as he raised the file and walked towards Mu Yu. I want to see what is causing trouble. Array patterns appeared in Mu Yu's hands. The bright array patterns spread out with him as the center, flying in all directions. However, the light from the array patterns was severely limited to Mu Yu's surroundings. The array patterns seemed to be able to swallow the light, and the entire room was still very dark. Hiding your head and tail, you don't dare to come out? Mu Yu shouted coldly. No one answered him. Only Old Master Zhao slowly walked over, holding a stupid file and trying to kill him. Mu Yu frowned. Other than acting like a mortal, the Zhao clan's Old Master's body was very strange. Even after being stabbed by Mu Yu, he was fine. It was like a corpse that was being controlled. There was no sense of pain, only the mechanical execution of orders to kill. However, it was ridiculous to ask a mortal with a file to kill Mu Yu, who was at the divinity stage. Mu Yu knew that Old Master Zhao was beyond saving. However, since the other party couldn't threaten his life, he didn't plan to destroy Old Master Zhao's body. The Old Master Zhao in front of him was just a puppet. The room became colder and colder, and the cold air even invaded Mu Yu's body, which was protected by his spiritual power, making him feel very uncomfortable. He had to find a mysterious guy hiding in the dark as soon as possible. In-Chi, don't show off in front of me. Mu Ling's sword appeared beside Mu Yu and instantly turned into a big tree. The branches firmly tied up Old Master Zhao, and the remaining leaves began to emit a stronger death chi, which immediately shrouded the In-Chi in the room. Wah! Like a receding tide, the strange In energy was defeated by the purest death energy. Mu Ling's branches were too powerful. They were specialized in restraining evil plants. All the In-Chi was swallowed by Mu Ling, and the whole dark room was instantly lit up by Mu Yu's formation. The tree branch disappeared, leaving behind only a branch that bound Old Master Zhao. Old Master Zhao kept struggling, and the Yin energy in his body was beginning to be sucked away by the wood spirit. Then Old Master Zhao's movements gradually weakened, and he stopped struggling. The murderous look in his eyes disappeared, and his head drooped. His chest gradually stopped rising and falling, and there was no more movement. The room was empty, and there was still only a bed. The only thing missing was the wooden man on the beam. The dangerous aura that Mu Yu felt had also disappeared. Mu Yu placed Old Master Zhao's body on the bed and walked towards the door. Bang! Mu Yu kicked the door open and walked into the courtyard. The formation under his feet had already enveloped the whole courtyard, illuminating every corner of the courtyard. The abnormality in the courtyard just now had disappeared, and it was very quiet. What on earth was that? Why is it so strange? Mu Yu thought for a while, and then walked towards Chun Erzwang's shop. However, the whole shop was very normal. Other than the gloominess, it was no different from daytime. The white moonlight shone on the top of the mountain, and the plants on the mountain were covered in a layer of silver frost. 5 figures walked hurriedly on the mountain path, passing through the ridges, and finally stopped in front of a new grave. These 5 people were none other than Chun Erzwang and his 4 companions. And this grave was the grave of the dead person that the 5 of them had just presided over. No one expected that the 5 of them would come back here in the middle of the night. The four assistants all had iron shovels in their hands, and without saying a word, they began to shovel the soil. In less than a quarter of an hour, the coffin that was buried during the day had appeared in front of them. If someone was here, they would be shocked to find that there was a slow, breathing sound coming from the coffin, as if the person buried inside was still alive. The four assistants jumped down and carried the coffin out. Chun Erzwang's face looked very pale under the moonlight. He walked over and quickly opened the coffin. Inside the coffin was an old woman with a face like orange peel. The old woman was a pure dead person. She was wearing a new shroud, and her chest was not moving up and down. The breathing sound did not come from her body. Chun Erzwang felt around inside the coffin and seemed to have touched something. Then, with a click, the bottom of the coffin suddenly flipped over, and the old woman was turned to the bottom. And from the back, a person that looked exactly like the old woman was turned out. This person's eyes were open, but its eyes were still like wood. It was the wooden figure that was carved during the day. But at this moment, the wooden figure's chest was moving up and down, and there were faint signs of life. Chun Erzwang actually did something to the coffin and made a secret compartment, hiding the old woman's wooden figure behind a real dead person. Chun Erzwang took out a pen from his bag and dipped it in the red paint that was used to paint the wooden figure. He casually pointed the pen at the two eyes of the wooden figure, and the red paint dripped into the wooden figure's eyes, but did not dye the wooden figure's eyes red, but turned them into normal black eyes. A wave of energy shot out from the wooden figure's eyes and instantly spread throughout its body. Then the wooden figure suddenly twitched and became no different from the old woman from before, and even came to life. The wooden old woman slowly sat up from the bottom of the coffin. Her eyes were still a little confused, as if she did not know where she was. Chun Erzwang numbly said, "Go home and welcome your descendants." The wooden old woman's eyes suddenly became as black as ink. She nodded and trembled as she climbed out of the coffin and then slowly went down the mountain under the moonlight. Chun Erzwang's four assistants had already filled the coffin and piled it up into a new grave. The only strange thing was that they did not bury the coffin, but lifted it up and left with Chun Erzwang. Old Su sat on his bed. He had listened to Mu Yu's words and still did not dare to get out of bed. Xiao Shuai's words had scared him to death, and he did not want to die. Could it be that Sir Mu Yu still has not removed my curse? Old Su's heart trembled as he thought, and suddenly regretted telling Mu Yu those words. But he remembered that Sir Mu Yu was very polite to him at such a young age, and also cured his many years of rheumatism and shortness of breath, so he felt that Mu Yu would not harm him. He coughed twice, and his addiction to smoking came back. After hesitating for a while, he still got out of bed and walked towards the hall. His house was very small, and the hall and room did not have a door, only a piece of broken curtain covering the door. He found his tobacco in the corner of the hall and took out a lighter from his pocket. He blew a mouthful of air, and the lighter let out a yellow flame. He lit the tobacco and fiercely took a puff. Although Sir Mu Yu said that I should not smoke, but if the King of Hell really wants to take me away, I have to make myself not so sad. Old Su slowly sat back on the chair and blew out a mouthful of smoke. The white smoke floated in the darkness and disappeared. There was still a white halo around his neck, and the spiritual energy that Xiao Shuai gave him had not dissipated. He curiously touched his neck, but the white halo was faintly discernible, and he could not touch it. The immortal's little mouse is really powerful. Io, if only my big yellow was half as smart as it. Then he thought, why was this halo like the collar he put on Big Yellow? But he did not care, as it was good enough that he could keep his life. Old Su took another puff of his tobacco and thought that if that young Sir Mu Yu saved his life, then everyone would be happy. The pests in the fields had been removed by Sir Mu Yu, and his rheumatism had been cured. He felt that there was nothing better than this in the world. Old Su's thoughts were very simple, and he was usually a very easily satisfied person. Woof, woof, woof. The big yellow dog in the courtyard suddenly barked, and it was barking quite fiercely. Old Su thought of his barking Big Yellow, and he could not help but envy the little mouse that could talk. He had lived alone for so many years, and only Big Yellow accompanied him. It was a pity that Big Yellow could not talk. If only Big Yellow could talk like the little mouse, it could also help him relieve his boredom. Big Yellow, don't bark, Old Sue said, but Big Yellow did not stop barking, and at this time, familiar footsteps sounded from outside the door. Sir Muyu, are you back? Old Sue quickly knocked down his tobacco and then blew the smoke in the room because Muyu had told him not to smoke. He ran over and wanted to open the door, but the door was pushed in from the outside. Old Sue looked at the person in front of him, and he was stunned. This person was not Muyu. You are. Old Sue looked at the person in front of him in horror. The person standing outside the door was actually another Old Sue. You don't even recognize yourself? Old Sue, who was outside the door, revealed a strange smile. He was no different from Old Sue, except for the pair of black eyes. Chapter 580. Muyu carefully searched Chun Erzwang's coffin shop. He almost turned the whole yard upside down, but he still didn't find any clues. The soul-stirring Inchi just now was just a trap, deliberately waiting for him here. Obviously, the other party already knew that Muyu came here during the day and deliberately set up some traps to deal with Muyu. Ordinary self-cultivators might not be able to escape from this strange death chi, but Muyu was different from other self-cultivators in that he had absolute control over death. These things were not worth mentioning and were easily dealt with by him. Where would Chun Erzwang go if he's not at home at night? Muyu pondered. The things that happened in this coffin shop were too strange, and he couldn't understand it all. Let's just set up a few trap arrays here to deal with that guy. We'll come back tomorrow to check the situation. Little Shuai said. Muyu nodded. With a tap of his foot, countless dense array patterns crawled out with him as the center and instantly merged into Chun Erzwang's yard and disappeared. At the same time, 4 array bases were distributed in 4 inconspicuous corners of the yard and were covered by special array patterns. Let's go to Mass Burial Valley to take a look. Dragon Tongue suggested. Big Earthworm, are you crazy? Why are you not sleeping at night and going to the dead pit? Little Shuai scolded. So what? Aren't we still in the dead shop? Dragon Tongue said. That's different. Let's go back and see that old man. Don't let him be strangled to death later. Little Shuai had never liked Mass Burial Valley. Why are you suddenly so concerned about him? Dragon Tongue curled her lips. He treats us well. Of course we have to care about him. This is called conscience, do you understand? Big Earthworm, do you know what conscience is? If something happens to the old man, won't your conscience hurt? Little Shuai said righteously. Nope. All the good food and drink went into your stomach. I didn't eat. Dragon Tongue said lazily. We really need to go back and see the old man. Muyu finished setting up the last array pattern and said, a wise move. Then we'll go to the Mass Burial Valley. Muyu added, F***CK. Muyu left Chun Erzwang's house in a flash. He descended from the sky and walked straight into Old Sue's courtyard. The room was still lit, and the big yellow dog was lying on the ground in the courtyard. When it saw Muyu, it even whimpered in a friendly manner. He pushed open the door and walked into the room. Old Sue was curled up on the bed and shivered. When he saw Muyu, he immediately climbed down from the bed as if he saw his savior. Esteemed master, how is it? Can I still live? Old Man Sue's face was full of anxiety. Muyu looked at Old Sue's earnest expression and sighed in his heart. But he still squeezed out a smile and said, Uncle, don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you. That's good, that's good. Old Man, Sue said gratefully. Did anything happen while I was gone? Muyu asked. Old Man Sue's face suddenly revealed a frightened expression. He quickly said, Something happened. Something happened. What happened? Muyu was slightly shocked. He looked at Old Man Sue's body and found that Old Man Sue was not injured. The white spirit chi ring on his neck was still there. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. Just now, there was a person who looked exactly like me running over. He said a few inexplicable words to me and then left. Old Sue patted his chest and said with lingering fear, Someone who looked exactly like you? What did he say? Muyu's heart skipped a beat. He remembered the wooden figure carved by Chun Erzwang's 4 workers. At that time, it had the image of Old Man Sue. Moreover, it strangely breathed as if it was coming to life. But at that time, The eyes of the wooden figure in the coffin shop had not been painted. He said that if you want to find him, go to the disorderly burial valley. He will wait for you there, and then left. Old Man Sue's face was filled with fear. When the topic of chaotic burial valley was brought up, he even flinched. The incident of Old Man Zhao coming back from the dead in chaotic burial valley was still vivid in his mind. Chaotic burial valley had become a nightmare for all the villagers. Muyu pondered for a moment and said, "Uncle, lock the door. I'm going to the disorderly burial valley." "Okay," Old Man Su quickly said. But before Muyu could turn around, Xiao Shuai had already jumped out and pounced on Old Man Su. "Xiao Shuai, what are you doing?" Muyu shouted. He wanted to grab Xiao Shuai's tail, but Xiao Shuai's speed was too fast. Even Muyu could not catch him. He's a wooden figure. Xiao Shuai's sharp claws had already reached out. Old Man Su's body suddenly emitted a strong yin qi, instantly blocking Xiao Shuai's body. However, Xiao Shuai's claws still passed through the yin qi and scratched Old Man Su's arm. Old Man Su's arm that was scratched by Xiao Shuai's claws was actually made of wood. Muyu looked at Old Man Su in shock, then looked at Xiao Shuai and said, "Why is this wooden figure so similar to Old Man Su? He can even speak like Old Man Su. Xiao Shuai, how can you tell?" At that time, Muyu could not sense the aura of the wooden figures in Chen Erzwang's shop. Those wooden figures were no longer pure wood. "I can't tell either, but I can be sure that the spirit energy on his neck was not caused by me. Also, he doesn't have the smell of roast goose on him. He must be a fake." Xiao Shuai snorted. "I don't know anything. I'm only responsible for passing on the message." Old Man Su's expression was still as terrified as before. He did not even have the slightest bit of cultivation. Then, a gust of yin qi revolved under his feet. A strange fluctuation suddenly trembled, and he disappeared from the room in an instant. Did this fellow stay here just to make me go to the chaotic burial valley? Muyu originally wanted to stop the wooden figure from leaving, but the wooden figure disappeared too suddenly. Moreover, it was already prepared. "What are you still standing there for? Go to the chaotic burial valley." Xiao Shuai squeezed into Muyu's close. "Didn't you not want to go just now? Why are you so impatient?" Long Tongue asked curiously. "The roast goose he made is very delicious. He can't die," Xiao Shuai said very honestly. Muyu took a step forward, and in the blink of an eye, he was heading towards the chaotic burial valley. The chaotic burial valley was still filled with waves of yin qi. The fog did not dissipate all year round. The moon shone brightly in the sky, but when it shone on the chaotic burial valley, it appeared to be a deathly white. At this moment, the bottom of the chaotic burial valley was dark. The moonlight was blocked by the yin qi and could not penetrate through. The wind blew fiercely on the mountain, and when it blew against the walls of the chaotic burial valley, it produced a series of sharp screeches. It sounded like the wails of angry ghosts, and it caused one's scalp to go numb. The yin qi in the valley slowly circulated, forming strange shapes in the air. It looked like countless ghosts were flapping around, and it also looked like resentful spirits were painfully pulling something. 5 silhouettes appeared on top of Mass Burial Valley. Their shadows were long and narrow under the moonlight, like bamboo poles. The people who came were Chun Erzwang and his 4 workers. The 4 workers carried the coffin that had just been dug out from a grave. They came to the edge of the chaotic burial valley, and without any hesitation or words, they directly threw the coffin into the chaotic burial valley. The coffin drew an arc at the edge of the chaotic burial valley, and with a whistling sound, it disappeared into the darkness of the chaotic burial valley. Rumble, as if lightning flashed and thunder roared, the entire chaotic burial valley trembled slightly. It was as if something strange had happened at the bottom of the valley. It was as if a huge rock had collapsed, and it also sounded like the roar of a ferocious beast. The surrounding temperature was getting lower and lower, and even the top of the chaotic burial valley was covered in a thick layer of frost. After Chun Erzwang and his 4 workers threw the coffin, they did not leave immediately. Instead, they jumped into the chaotic burial valley. "Hiss! A cold and domineering Chi suddenly rushed up from the bottom of the chaotic burial valley, and it turned into a demonic ghost. It roared and danced in the air above the chaotic burial valley, and it let out a sharp and unbearable cry. After that, it gradually faded away, and the chaotic burial valley returned to its peaceful state. Not long after, ripples appeared in the air above the chaotic burial valley, and Muyu appeared out of thin air above the chaotic burial valley. He had seen the figures of Chun Erzwang and his 4 workers from afar, and he also saw them throwing the coffin into the chaotic burial valley and jumping down. The moment the coffin fell into the chaotic burial valley, he heard the sound of lightning and thunder. The sound of lightning and thunder that old man Su had mentioned was indeed there. He walked step by step along the edge of the chaotic burial valley, and every step he took was like a blooming lotus flower. Intertwining black and white array patterns appeared and disappeared into the rocks. The person in front of him clearly knew a little about array formations, and Muyu had to leave a way out for himself. "I want to see what kind of divine being you are." After walking for 9 steps, he stopped. The array formation that he used to retreat had already silently covered the cover of the chaotic burial valley. Muyu looked at the pitch-black abyss of the chaotic burial valley and jumped down without hesitation. Swish! A brilliant light bloomed around Muyu's body. In the dark night of the chaotic burial valley, there was no light at all. The mysterious person in the dark definitely knew that Muyu had come here, so there was no need for Muyu to hide anything. However, the Inchi in the chaotic burial valley was the same as the Inchi in Chun Erzwang's house. It was constantly swallowing the light, suppressing the light on Muyu's body to a very small area. It was unable to shine too far, so Muyu was still unable to see the situation around him clearly. Whoosh! The sound of lightning and thunder had already disappeared, and there was only the howling of the cold wind that reverberated throughout the entire chaotic burial valley. The ghostly shadows were eerie, and it seemed like something was going to come out from the darkness. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that it was just an illusion. Every time Muyu fell, the temperature seemed to drop a little. When he stepped on the solid bottom of the valley, the temperature had already dropped to below 0. The same scene, Muyu still did not see any coffins or dead people. Chun Erzwang and his 4 workers had disappeared after jumping into the chaotic burial valley. "I'm already here. You don't dare to show yourself?" Muyu coldly said. Mu Ling's sword had already turned into a spider web of roots under his feet, quietly spreading out. "Jie, a cultivator, you really have guts. I wonder if the brain of a 3rd celestial layer cultivator is delicious." A strange laughter suddenly resounded in all directions, reverberating for a long time. It was simply impossible to know where this voice came from. "I'm afraid you'll have indigestion." Muyu was still looking for the mysterious person in the dark. Mu Ling's roots had almost covered the entire valley, but he still did not find anything strange. "Shio!" A sharp whistling sound rang out, and all the Inchi swept towards the sky, forming a black fog. The edges of the black fog were suffused with a red light. From afar, it looked like a hunchback, but it had a pair of huge wings on its back. Oomph. Pretending to be mysterious. No matter what you are, if you come out to cause trouble, then you're courting death. Runes spread out, and Muyu's figure stepped out. The shadow sword in his hand transformed into a myriad of illusions. The sharp and domineering sword Qi was like a heavenly sword descending from the 9th heaven, carrying an insufferably arrogant aura. Like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves, it chopped towards the red fog. Voila! The fog in front of him was like flowing water being chopped apart by the shadow sword. All the fog suddenly dissipated, revealing 2 figures inside. Muyu's gaze was startled. The sword Qi in his hand was forcibly moved away, and it chopped towards the cliff of the chaotic burial valley. However, the cliff of the chaotic burial valley emitted a surge of Yin Qi, which bounced the sword Qi away. The sword Qi bounced against the opposite cliff and then bounced into the sky, disappearing without a trace. This cliff was actually not damaged by Mu Yu's sword chi, and it even had a strange rebound ability to dissolve Mu Yu's sword chi. Lord Mu Yu, don't kill me. Don't kill me. Chapter 581. The fog dissipated, and the figures of the two old men Su appeared in front of Mu Yu. A red rope was wrapped around their necks, connecting them together. The scratches that Xiao Shuai had caused did not appear on the two old men Su's bodies. It was obvious that they had been repaired. I heard that you can distinguish between the real and the fake. I want to see how you can distinguish between these two people. The eerie laughter sounded again. The two old men Su seemed to be hung in the air by something. The spiritual energy that Xiao Shuai had created around their necks had also disappeared. The light of the shadow clone sword shone on the two old men Su's pale faces. The old men Su was extremely frightened, and their bodies were trembling because of fear. The moment he saw Mu Yu appear, he was pleasantly surprised. However, Mu Yu's sword had almost cut him in half, which scared him half to death. Xiao Shuai, can you tell which one is the real old man? Mu Yu asked. Xiao Shuai looked at the two holes in Mu Yu's clothes and rolled his eyes for a long time. He said, I don't know. The spiritual energy around their necks has disappeared. Even the smell of roast duck has disappeared. I really can't tell. Jia, this mortal who leaked my secret, I will definitely eat his brain in the end. However, his life will be up to you to decide. If you choose to let one live, I will kill the other. You better choose well. The eerie voice laughed arrogantly. The red ropes suddenly broke apart and turned into ghost claws. They attached themselves to the heads of the two old men Su, separating the two of them. Lord Mu Yu, I am the real one. He is the fake one. I am the real one. You're the fake one. The two old men Su anxiously defended themselves. The two people's expressions and movements were strangely similar. Even the aura on their bodies was no different. The vitality of the two people in Mu Yu's eyes was also very vigorous. They did not seem to be fake. Mu Yu didn't know how to differentiate the two of them. He wasn't familiar with old man Su and didn't know his usual habits. But even if he knew, he wouldn't be able to differentiate them in this situation. This mysterious guy was too disgusting. He used the wooden puppet to connect two people's lives. This was the first time Mu Yu had seen such a strange method. Then which one do you choose? I'll count to 3. If you don't make a choice, I'll just kill one of you. The sinister voice echoed in the air. Lord Mu Yu, I'm serious. That day, you planted a flower in my field and helped me drive away the pests in my field. Old man Su on the left hurriedly shouted. I'm the real one, Lord Mu Yu. You cure my rheumatism and my shortness of breath. All right, you also removed the curse on my body. Old man Su on the right also hurriedly said. In order to gain Mu Yu's trust, they began to fight to be the first to talk about the things that happened with Mu Yu. But the more they talked, the more Mu Yu couldn't differentiate them. Unless little Shuai rushed over and slashed the two of them again, who wouldn't bleed? But that guy definitely wouldn't give Mu Yu such a chance. Little Shuai suddenly stuck his head out and asked loudly, Old man, how many spoonfuls of salt did you put in the roast goose? How long did it take? 1.5 spoonfuls. 45 minutes. 1.5 spoonfuls. 45 minutes. The two of them almost said at the same time. Oh, so it's like that. Little Shuai retracted his head back. Can you tell by asking like that? Dragon Vine asked curiously. No, I'm just asking. This way, I can make my own roast goose next time. Damn it, you still want to eat at a time like this? Dragon Vine cursed. Actually, it's useless no matter what they say. That kind of voodoo technique can turn a person into two. This way, they will have the same memories, so it's useless to ask. However, although their bodies feel the same, one of them is still wooden in nature. It's just that it's covered by the voodoo technique, just like old man Zhao just now. Mu Yu, do you understand what I mean? Little Shuai said, I'm planning to do that. Mu Yu's gaze focused. Suddenly, countless branches rose from under the two old men Su's feet. The branches grew extremely fast and instantly wrapped around old man Su's body. A strong aura of death instantly invaded old man Su's body. The two old men Su screamed in fear. However, The eyes of the old man Su on the right gradually dimmed. A gust of yin qi suddenly rose from his body and wrapped around him. As for the old man Su on the left, he was already brought to Mu Yu's side by the branches. The red rope around his neck rose up and wanted to grab old man Su's head, but it was smashed by Mu Yu's palm. Great, Lord Mu Yu, you didn't recognize the wrong person. You didn't recognize the wrong person, old man Su said excitedly. He touched his neck, which was still dark red. Mu Yu's hand swept across old man Su's neck. A cool aura covered old man Su's neck. Old man, don't move first. Dragon Vine, protect him. Mu Yu's hand transformed into runes. A golden rune surged out from his hand and surrounded old man Su. Okay, Dragon Vine's small figure flashed and landed on old man Su's shoulder. A deep voice resounded in old man Su's ears. Old man Su was shocked and asked softly, "Who's talking?" "Lord Mu Yu." "Who is Dragon Vine?" "It's me." Dragon Vine swung his tail on old man Su's shoulder and patted old man Su's face with his tail. Old man Su turned his head and was shocked. He shouted in panic, "Ah, there's a snake. There's a snake." Little Shuai immediately laughed. "It's not a snake, it's a big earthworm. Snake your sister. I'm a dragon." Dragon Vine roared angrily. His body immediately grew bigger and surrounded old man Su. The huge dragon head extended in front of old man Su and roared in a voice that old man Su could understand. "If you say I'm a snake again, do you believe that I'll eat you? You. Call me Grandpa Dragon. Grandpa Dragon, Grandpa Dragon, Grandpa Dragon." Old man Su's mouth was wide open. He didn't come back to his senses for a long time. He was stunned by the dragon head, but his mouth kept muttering, "Grandpa Dragon. I, Grandpa Dragon, will personally protect you. Are you touched?" Dragon Vine was very satisfied that old man Su was stunned by him. In Dragon Vine's eyes, his dragon body was very majestic. "I don't dare to move. I don't dare to move. I don't dare to move. I don't dare to move." Old man Su quickly said. Dragon Vine's forehead straightened 3 lines. Mu Yu held the shadow clone sword and rushed into the darkness. The sword light scattered and instantly chopped toward a rock in the air. Ding! A black shadow slid away from the rock and flew up like a loach. His body suddenly lit up with a red light. However, the yin qi still enveloped his body, making it impossible to see what he looked like. "You're too ugly to show your true face." Mu Yu coldly confronted this ghost shadow. What a powerful plant. I don't remember such a powerful plant in the 3rd layer of heaven. It can even melt my yin qi. The ghost shadow looked at the strange plants on the surrounding rock walls. The plants seemed to have a strange power that slowly melted the ice on the rock walls. "There are many things that you don't know." Mu Yu lightly tapped the formation under his feet. His entire body suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind the ghost shadow. Suddenly, a crimson red hook appeared from the ghostly shadow and blocked Mu Yu's shadow sword. At the same time, a crimson red spiritual force came from the hook, exuding a rotten smell, and swept towards the shadow sword. The sword chi in Mu Yu's hand shook and instantly dispersed the red spiritual power. Pong! Mu Yu's figure constantly disappeared and reappeared. In the blink of an eye, he had already exchanged more than 100 blows with the ghost shadow. However, the ghost shadow's cultivation was not weaker than Mu Yu. He was not afraid of Mu Yu's sword chi. He was not even afraid of the tree branches that occasionally attacked him. "Little brat, I still haven't recovered my strength. Otherwise, do you think you can live until now?" The ghost shadow coldly said. "You haven't recovered your strength? Then what does that have to do with me? Do you want me to wait for you to recover before fighting? You want to talk about principles when fighting? Are you an idiot?" The sword in Mu Yu's hand did not show any mercy. Thousands of sword shadows were like endless waves. They layered on top of each other, and each layer was stronger than the last. "Mu Yu, let's roast the ghost shadow together," Little Shuai shouted. Mu Yu's mind moved, and the green formation surrounded him. Little Shuai had already jumped out and landed in the center of the wind-wind heart-linking formation. Little Shuai's mysterious thunderfall. Blue light sputtered from his small body. One of his small hands was on his waist while the other pointed to the sky. All the white fur on his body stood up. A blue sword shape with his small claws as the hilt soared into the sky. The sword in Mu Yu's hand was also filled with blue electric sparks. The air started to become stagnant and dry. The spirit power collided with each other and burst out with overbearing thunder snakes. Countless thunder snakes kept flowing in the air and then exploded. Thunder Snake's swift shadow. The thunder snakes turned into afterimages and instantly lit up the entire sky. The tyrannical and violent thunder and lightning symbolized the justice of the world and was able to disperse the evil Inchi. The electric sparks crackled, and the dry air was on the verge of exploding. The blue light instantly enveloped the ghost shadow. Countless thunder snakes weaved through the ghost shadow and took away pieces of Inchi. Little Shuai's mysterious thunderfall and Mu Yu's thunder snakes were pure and overbearing. They attacked the ghost shadow from different angles in the chaotic burial valley. That fellow roared in anger. The scarlet light shone brightly and suddenly exploded. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless long hooks shot out and spun in the air. With a speed not inferior to the thunder snakes, they met the swift thunder snakes. Every long hook instantly destroyed the thunder snakes. Little Shuai's mysterious thunderfall was extremely overbearing. It came from Mu Yu's sword intent, but it could not do anything to those demonic scarlet long hooks. All the sword-shaped thunder and lightning were blocked. This fellow's skin is thick. He's not afraid of electricity. Little Shuai gritted his teeth and said, "Aren't you also not afraid of electricity?" Mu Yu did not expect himself to be able to take down this fellow in 2 or 3 moves. The other party's origin was unknown, and his cultivation was not inferior to his. This was enough for Mu Yu to take him seriously. "But I'm handsome. It's normal for a handsome person to be struck by lightning. Looks like I'll have to take out my 5-blow thunderstruck." Little Shuai shouted. Blue electric sparks rose from his body again. What surprised Mu Yu was that these electric sparks gradually peeled off from his body and then formed the shape of a little Shuai. This electric spark Little Handsome held a big blue sword that was 10 times bigger than itself in its 2 small hands. It swayed and slashed at Ghost Shadow. "Holy shit, Little Shuai. Do you have to make it so flashy?" Mu Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. "This is more imposing. Hurry up and help me. You know what I'm thinking." The wind-wind heart-linking formation allowed Mu Yu and Little Shuai to communicate mentally. Little Shuai's plan also appeared in Mu Yu's mind. Little Shuai held the big sword. It looked like it would fall with a touch, but its sword intent was extremely overbearing and swift. It drew a terrifying arc in the air and ruthlessly slashed at the ghost shadow. Although the little fellow was insignificant in front of the big sword, when they fought, the big sword was nimble and changeable. It was not careless at all. However, the ghost shadow's red hooks drew a scarlet light and instantly intertwined in the air, cutting Little Shuai's big sword into several pieces. Now, Chapter 582. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This bastard cut my sword into another section. My 5 thunders are at most 1 more. Little Commander counted with his hands. Little Commander's big sword was cut into 6 sections by the red hook, but did not disappear immediately. It still maintained the appearance of a broken sword, and the sword was still composed of pure electric sparks. "Then I'll blow him up 1 more time." Mu Yu appeared above the 6 sections of the broken sword, and the runes in his hands quickly intertwined. Black and white inscriptions appeared from his hands from time to time and merged into the 6 sections of the broken sword. The 6 sections of the broken sword were instantly wrapped into 6 balls of blue electric sparks, and they kept collapsing. The originally basin-sized broken sword was shrunk by Mu Yu's runes, and in the end, only 6 thumb-sized blue beads were left. Although the blue beads were small, they kept bursting with blue flames, and they contained a terrifying power. The majestic lightning's spiritual energy was forcibly compressed by Mu Yu's runes to such a small extent, and the spiritual energy inside it had already undergone a qualitative change, and it could not wait to burst out. Little Commander's 5 thunders. Little Commander shouted with great momentum. Mu Yu's array technique was completely inspired by Little Commander and Dragonvine. Just a while ago, Little Commander had been blown up by his own 5 thunders. At that time, because Mu Yu had used this array technique for the first time, he did not have a good grasp of its power, and as a result, he suppressed it too much, causing it to explode. However, after Mu Yu pondered for a long time, he gradually figured out the appropriate amount. The blue lightning bead instantly disappeared into the void, and with a majestic momentum, it fell towards Ghost Shadow. The surrounding air was compressed by it, and even the energy on Ghost Shadow's body was instantly pulled away. Ghost Shadow wanted to dodge, but the blue lightning bead had already exploded, and the terrifying electric sparks exploded, forming a blue curtain that enveloped Ghost Shadow. Boom! The explosion resounded throughout the entire chaotic burial valley, and it reverberated in the valley for a long time. Electric sparks sputtered everywhere, and all the energy was blown away. Oomph! You want to deal with me like this? You're too inexperienced. The strong explosion did not hurt Ghost Shadow, but his voice was very irritable. Obviously, the lightning still affected him, and it made him very angry. After eating this one, there are still 5 more. Unknowingly, Gui Ying's body had been surrounded by 5 lightning pearls. Before he could even react, a powerful explosion once again blasted towards Gui Ying. The powerful lightning force instantly engulfed Gui Ying. Countless bolts of lightning flew rapidly, shattering the yin qi on Ghost Shadow's body. As the yin qi disappeared, a human figure slowly appeared. When Mu Yu saw this figure, he was stunned. He thought that the person in the Ghost Shadow must be too ugly and had a ferocious expression, so he didn't dare to show his face. However, he never expected that the person in front of him wasn't a person with protruding eyes and a slanted nose. Instead, it was a devastatingly beautiful woman. She was wearing a black veil, and her figure was curvaceous, causing people to admire her. This woman had a very strange aura, which made people feel an indescribable sense of intimacy. Wow, why did my 5-blow thunderstruck bring out such a beautiful big sister? Little Handsome's eyes were straight, and at the same time, his eyes fiercely glanced at the black, clothed woman's chest. He then stretched out his little claws and clenched them in the air twice, laughing foolishly. Maybe the way we struck her was not right. Mu Yu blinked his eyes in amazement, and also felt that it was very strange. In such a strange place like chaotic Burial Valley, such a gorgeous woman appeared, and she seemed to be out of place with the surroundings. It was really rare. All of you, leave your lives behind, the black-clothed woman gloomily said. Why is your voice so unpleasant? Mu Yu and Little Handsome looked at each other and saw the disappointment in each other's eyes. The black-clothed woman's voice was very rough, and it didn't sound like a woman's voice at all. It was more like an emotionless demon beast, a bit like a male duck quacking, and a bit like nails scratching the wall. Such a pity for such a beautiful big sister, and such an unpleasant voice. Her breasts are so big like dough, I want to pinch them. Little Handsome muttered, "Pinch your balls. Hurry up and kill her, so she won't come out and harm people again." Mu didn't think that this black-clothed woman was a good person. Her aura didn't belong to someone from the gate of hell, and she also wasn't some kind of demon beast. Mu had never seen someone like her before. However, this fellow was able to do such a heinous thing, so Mu had to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. The shadow sword in his hand once again surged with tyrannical sword chi, and the insufferably arrogant lightning once again came from his sword. Yes, pinch her 2 balls, they're so big. Little Handsome wiped his saliva, and then raised his little claws towards the sky, and a large blue sword appeared in his hand once again. The black-robed woman held a long red hook in her hands. Then, the hooks swept towards Mu Yu from both sides in a bewitching manner. Muyu fearlessly met the attack, and a violent sword chi instantly struck the hook. Blue and red light intertwined in the entire mass gray valley. The lightning struck the stone wall, and this time, the ice on the stone wall couldn't reflect Muyu's sword chi. Lightning seemed to be the nemesis of this ice, and ice shards instantly flew everywhere. However, what was strange was that the stone wall didn't shatter. The black-clothed woman's red hook exchanged more than 1,000 blows with Muyu, and, at the same time, she was able to free up her hands to deal with Little Handsome's lightning sword. She was able to easily deal with Muyu and Little Handsome by herself. Those strange hooks didn't fear Muyu's sword chi. The two sides were evenly matched, and neither could do anything to the other. "Muyu, do you need my help?" Long Tongue yelled from afar. "No need. Little Handsome, and I will take care of her." Countless runes shot out from Muyu's body and rushed towards the surrounding stone walls. In an instant, they disappeared into the stone walls. "This is not a place where you can come," the black-clothed woman shouted, and the entire mass gray valley suddenly became restless. Then, a huge rumbling sound came from an unknown place. It was like the sound of rolling thunder or the sound of thousands of mountains collapsing. It was like the sound of the coffin falling down. It's coming, it's coming. That's the sound. The king of hell is going to open the gate of hell." Old Su suddenly shouted in panic. Muyu listened carefully, and the sound became more and more obvious. It wasn't thunder, it was more like the sound of mountains, rivers, and floods. Splash! Suddenly, the sound of water splashing came from the corner of the valley. Then, Muyu saw a shocking scene. A yellow flood rushed towards them, as if it wanted to swallow everything in the mass gray valley. In an instant, the bottom of the valley was flooded, and it swept towards Muyu. "Dragon Vine, quickly take this old man away," Muyu shouted. He himself fell into the wind heart-linking array. Little Shuai withdrew his sword and jumped onto Muyu's shoulder. Old Su looked at the unceasing flood in horror. Then he felt something tighten around his waist, and his whole body was thrown into the sky and then fell on something. He looked carefully, and he was actually riding on Dragon Vine's back. "Hold on to me. I don't care if you fall," Dragon Vine coldly snorted. Old Su quickly hugged Dragon Vine's neck, and Dragon Vine carried him into the sky, rushing towards the top of the mass gray valley. "Want to run? It's not that easy." The black-clothed woman sneered, and the flood instantly rolled up huge waves, which turned into ghost claws and rushed towards Muyu and Dragon Vine. Under the illumination of the sword light, one could clearly see that there were countless coffin boards and wood shavings in the flood, as well as some tattered black shrouds and countless eerie white bones. These were the people who were sent into the mass gray valley. Damn, I was wondering why the bottom of the valley was so clean. So those dead people were all swept away by the flood. Muyu looked at the skeletons in the flood in disbelief, and his heart was extremely shocked. Who would have thought that the flood would sweep away all the dead people? This is the Yellow Springs. The Yellow Springs Road of the underworld. Heavens! Could it be that I'm already dead? Old Su was scared out of his wits, and his face was pale. He firmly held onto Dragon Vine's scales, afraid that he would fall and be swept away by the Yellow Springs and become one of the skeletons. Muyu flashed to Old Su's side and grabbed Dragon Vine's body. The runes under his feet flashed, and the Big Dipper constellation array had already brought him to the top of the mass gray valley. But just as he appeared, the overwhelming flood poured down on him, and countless skeletons turned into terrifying giant hands, wanting to grab Muyu. Muyu could only teleport away again. Where did this flood come from? We didn't see any gap in the mass gray valley. Little Shuai shouted. Muyu also felt that it was strange, but now was not the time to ask. He kept teleporting, and at the same time, covered Dragon Vine's huge body with his spiritual energy so that it would not be contaminated by the Yellow Springs. The flood emitted a sour smell and came with an unstoppable momentum. But Muyu still broke through the obstruction of the flood and finally rushed out of the mass gray valley and stopped above the mass gray valley. The flood had already completely submerged the entire mass grave valley, and the waves kept hitting the edge of the mass grave valley. Then, the skeletons in the flood began to gather, forming a huge bone palm, and the black-clothed woman stood on top of this bone palm, coldly looking at Muyu. Under the moonlight, the mass grave valley looked very strange. The bottomless pit of the dead was suddenly filled with flood, and the skeletons of the dead seemed to have a consciousness, and they were still trembling. The skulls floated to the surface of the water, and they all turned to look at Muyu. Some of the skulls' faces were not completely rotten, and there was disgusting hair. The most chilling thing was that the eye sockets of these skulls were shining with a demonic red light, like a red flame, but it was not extinguished by the flood. "Do you think you can escape?" The black-clothed woman's voice was very unpleasant to hear. She stood on the bone palm, and the long hook in her hand looked very demonic under the moonlight. 4 coffins appeared around the mass grave valley, and they surrounded Muyu. The 4 coffins were shining with a red light, and each coffin was connected by a red light. In the middle of the light, there were skulls, and they were jumping on the light. The lids of the 4 coffins slowly opened, and Chen Erzwang's 4 assistants slowly stood up from the coffins. Their eye sockets were also flickering with a demonic red light. Chen Erzwang was standing behind the black-clothed woman, and he silently looked at Muyu. "To be honest, if you don't talk, it's not bad," little Shuai muttered. "Where the hell did you come from?" Muyu really could not treat the black-clothed woman in front of him as a human, because the things that had happened in the past 2 days were too strange. The hanging wooden man, the brainless old Master Zhao, and this woman who looked graceful but had an unpleasant voice. Chapter 583. The yellow springs surged as it slapped against the jagged edges of Mass Burial Valley. The splashes of water were mixed with wood shavings and broken bones, but not a single drop of water flowed out of Mass Burial Valley. All of them fell back into Mass Burial Valley. "Me? Ha 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 ha. You don't have to care who I am. You only need to remember that I am Akatsuki, your god," the black-clothed woman said coldly. "God? You must be crazy." Dragon Vine curled its lips. "Akatsuki? But you're wearing black clothes." Little Shuai said in surprise. "Akatsuki? Is she Ain's soldier of the underworld? Is the hook in her hand used to steal souls?" Old Su asked in fear as he stood on Dragon Vine's neck. "Who cares if she's a red or black ghost? If she wants to steal souls here, I'll cut her down first." The shadow clone sword in Muyu's hand glowed with a green light as a sharp sword beam shot out, heading straight for Akatsuki. However, a sinister stream of water rose up from the yellow springs, blocking in front of Muyu. Muyu's sword beam was fierce and overbearing, instantly splitting the stream of water in front of him. However, at this moment, the 4 coffins suddenly glowed with a crimson light and soared into the sky. Countless skeletons jumped out of the yellow springs, condensing into skeletons in the air. These skeletons emitted a demonic crimson light. Each skeleton stood on the surface of the yellow springs and slowly wrapped around Muyu. "I kind of miss Desert Eagle's Ein corpse formation," Little Shuai said with some nostalgia. Little Shuai said with nostalgia. Back then, it had controlled the Ein corpse formation and happily danced for a while. It had also played many messy games while it was at it. "The Ein corpse formation looks much cuter than these disgusting things," Muyu said. His sword chi was already high up in the air. Violent sword shadows flashed and interweaved among the skeletons. In an instant, all of the skeletons were shattered. Bones were scattered all over the sky. However, the water of the yellow springs spurted out countless water pillars. More skeletons crawled out from the yellow spring. "Why don't we control these bones and see if we can influence them and teach them to dance?" Little Shuai suggested. Dead things were the most obedient in front of Mu Ling. The black branches instantly bloomed endlessly, and the green leaves turned into shadows that filled the sky and flew towards the skeleton. Countless leaves floated into the gaps between the bones of the skeleton, and each leaf sprouted new branches, and the roots covered the entire skeleton in a bustling manner. However, These skeletons were still struggling, tearing at the leaves on their bodies, trying to break free. Mu Ling had no way to control them. This is my Yellow Springs spirit weapon. How can you control it? Akatsuki said with contempt. It really is the Yellow Springs. Don't tell me you're really from the underworld. Even more Yellow Springs transformed into gigantic hands and slapped down on Muyu. Muyu's sword energy struck the Yellow Springs, causing them to tremble. However, the Yellow Springs showed no signs of dissipating. This Yellow Springs flood was very strange. It carried a pungent, corrosive smell, causing Muyu to feel very uncomfortable. Mu Ling can't control it? Strange. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any dead things that the underworld grass can't control. Oh, I understand what this Yellow Springs is. Little Shuai rubbed his chin and said thoughtfully, "What is it?" "Corpse water." Little Shuai spat out these two words in disgust. You can't be saying that this flood is all the decaying corpse water of the dead, right? Muyu's expression was very strange. Then how many people had to die, and how long had it taken to collect such a torrential spring water? Then he remembered that over the years, tens of thousands of dead people had already gathered in disorderly Burial Valley. It didn't seem that difficult to obtain. Anyway, the skeletons of the dead aren't considered dead when soaked in this water. Their souls are all imprisoned in the Yellow Springs corpse water. They aren't purely dead things, but half-dead things. That's why Mu Ling can't take them down. Little Shuai said. Little Shuai's expression was still a little regretful. It had originally thought about what kind of dance to teach these skeletons later. Then how do we stop this disgusting Yellow Springs corpse water? Muyu occasionally dodged the torrential Yellow Springs water that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. At the same time, he also had to pay attention to not be contaminated by the ghost claws. The powerful sword chi in his hand could only temporarily push back the corpse water. It couldn't destroy it. I don't know. Hey, be careful. Chun Erzwang's 4 workers suddenly rushed over while stepping on the coffin. The scarlet whips in their hands were like venomous snakes. They lashed towards Muyu. Muyu's sword chi intertwined with their whips, creating a crisp sound of collision. However, there wasn't any damage. It only sent the 4 workers flying. But very quickly, tentacles emerged from the Yellow Springs corpse water and stabilized their bodies, sending them back to the coffin. The coffin lit up with a scarlet radiance that surged into the 4 workers' bodies. The aura of the 4 workers became even stronger. While the Yellow Springs corpse water and Chun Erzwang's 4 workers rushed over, Akatsuki sat cross-legged on the bone palm. Countless inchi surged out from the Yellow Springs corpse water and poured into Akatsuki's body. Chun Erzwang stood behind him with his head lowered. His expression couldn't be seen clearly. However, countless inchi surged out from his body and was absorbed by Akatsuki. At this moment, many shadows suddenly appeared on the road leading up from the disorderly Burial Valley. An old woman led 7 people and slowly walked up from the mountain path to the disorderly Burial Valley. Isn't that Xinghua's mother who was just buried yesterday? Why is Xinghua following behind her? And her child? Old Su jumped in fright. Muyu also frowned because he realized that the people behind the old woman had already lost their vitality. There were already 7 dead people. Among them, there was even a boy and a girl. Their lives were actually taking away the lives of people who died of natural causes. What a vicious method. Muyu felt a burst of anger in his heart. He didn't expect that this Akatsuki wouldn't even let the children off. However, the old woman had already jumped into the Yellow Springs corpse water with her family and stood firmly on top of the Yellow Springs corpse water. Following that, 10 coffins suddenly floated out from the surrounding Yellow Springs corpse water. From each coffin, people wearing burial clothes slowly crawled out. Their bodies were soaked in the Yellow Springs corpse water and became swollen and rotten. Upon closer inspection, these people were all old men and old women. They were the villagers who had just died not long ago. Many of them were secretly dug out by Chun Erzwang from the ground. These dead people stepped on the Yellow Springs corpse water, but they didn't sink. All of them looked at Akatsuki with lifeless eyes. Akatsuki's long hook suddenly became like a thin snake. It coiled around the necks of every dead person. Following that, the two thin hooks on the long hook bit down on their necks. Muyu looked at the dead people that floated out from the Yellow Springs corpse water in astonishment. He suddenly understood how the wound on Patriarch Zhao's neck came about. It was the same as these people. It was also caused by the strange scarlet-red long hook. At this moment, the other end of the strange scarlet-red long hook was stuck on Akatsuki's body. From time to time, white things would be transmitted into Akatsuki's body from the long hook. Isn't that old Nyo from the neighboring village? And that Su Earnyang who died 2 months ago? How did they all come back to life? Old man Su looked at the dead people standing on the Yellow Springs corpse water in horror. This woman is eating the brains of these dead people. The brains of these dead people can make her stronger. Xiao Shui said with disgust. Muyu frowned. He didn't expect to see such a disgusting thing like eating human brains here. What? Eating human brains? Ugh. Old man Su is already vomiting at the side. He vomited so much that his face was pale. To a small villager like him, this was too shocking. Be careful. Don't vomit on me. Long Tongue shook her body. Long Tongue, take care of Uncle. I'm going to kill that brain-eating pervert. Muyu's feet flashed. The formation patterns brought him away. A sharp sword chi instantly fell from above Akatsuki and slashed towards those scarlet-red long hooks. Countless Yellow Springs corpse water blocked in front of him again. It wanted to stop Muyu. Muyu's figure suddenly became faintly discernible. The shadow sword split into 9. His entire body was constantly flickering in the air. It was as if he had split into 9 figures. Each figure displayed the sword force of the Heaven Sword 9 guides. At a certain moment, the 9 sword forces suddenly performed the same action at the same time. The 9 shadow swords' sword tips clashed with each other. The arrogant and domineering sword intent in Muyu's hand trembled and splashed. It was as if there was only one person left in the world. That sword was so pure, without any fancy place. It was a simple sword, a simple stab. 9 returned to 1. The sword stabbed out. It was as if there were millions of sword stabs. It was unstoppable and powerful. The terrifying sword chi instantly evaporated the Yellow Springs corpse water in front of him, turning it into nothingness. That sword was mighty and domineering. It was the world's strongest sword force. It was as if it made everything else lose their color. Muyu's sword chi was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. It instantly broke through the Yellow Springs corpse water and slammed into the scarlet-red long hooks. Bastard, you dare! Akatsuki was furious. She didn't think that Muyu would suddenly rush out of the Yellow Springs corpse water's obstruction and even attack her. Under such a situation, she didn't have a way to deal with it. She could only forcefully grab Chun Erzwang behind her and throw him towards Muyu. Chun Erzwang's eyes were as black as ink. A demonic red long hook also appeared in his hand. However, under Muyu's sword, his long hook was shattered before it could be raised. His entire body was also torn into pieces by Muyu's sword energy. In the end, he was only a mortal. There was no way for him to survive under Muyu's sword. When Muyu saw Chun Erzwang, he didn't have any intention of withdrawing his sword. This was because he found that Chun Erzwang no longer had any life force in him. If he wanted to kill Akatsuki, he couldn't care about Chun Erzwang. Boom! Muyu's sword energy crushed Akatsuki's long hook like a hot knife through butter and slammed into Akatsuki's body. Akatsuki painfully roared. A large bloody hole had been blasted into her chest by the sword energy. Muyu, you destroyed one of her big peaks. Little Shui stared at Akatsuki's chest in astonishment. Originally, there were 2 seductive big peaks on her chest. Shut up. Akatsuki was sent flying. Muyu's sword energy had blasted a large hole in her body. However, she quickly stabilized her body. An incomparably angry expression appeared on her beautiful face. Chapter 584. Are you crazy? If you want to fight, then fight. Why are you screaming like a ghost? You scared me. Little Shuai cursed loudly. Muyu stared at Akatsuki. He didn't expect that his most powerful 9-9-1 sword technique would not be able to take down this abnormal woman so easily. The opponent's strength was beyond Muyu's imagination. Lowly humans, you dare to hurt our great moon god. You deserve to die. Akatsuki's voice was very sharp, and her face was very distorted. Then, her body began to change shape under the moonlight. At this time, Akatsuki no longer looked like a human. Her beautiful body's joints crackled. Then, many ugly dark red scales grew all over her body, reflecting the cold moonlight. It was very strange. Why is this guy more narcissistic than you, little Shuai? Isn't it ashamed? Muyu stared at the guy with disgust. That's right. I don't even dare to call myself great. This guy is really shameless. It's not a shifter. How can it change shape? Little Shuai muttered curiously. Akatsuki's body was no longer curvaceous. Instead, it became very bloated, as if it had been soaked in corpse water for a long time. A pair of red wings even grew out of her back. There was not a single hair on the wings, and the edges were covered with dark red scales. They were purely fleshy wings, and they were fat. Especially that face. It was completely distorted, as if it had been scalded by boiling water. It became incomparably red, and there were even red feathers growing out of it. It was as if the feathers on the wings had grown to the face. It was very strange. This guy's mouth was thin and long, like a crack. It didn't look like it had lips. The originally devastatingly beautiful Akatsuki had turned into a funny and ugly monster in the blink of an eye. Aya. So her two big peaks were also fake. Little Shuai looked at Akatsuki's chest with slight regret. There were two horns there. At this time, one of the horns had been cut off by Muyu, leaving only one protruding, shining with a cold light. From its voice, I can tell that this thing is definitely ugly. How can a beautiful woman's voice be so unpleasant to the ears? Muyu felt that a monster that could cause trouble in a place like Mass Burial Valley was definitely not a good person. What do you think it looks like? The people of the demon race were not that ugly. Also, I don't recognize this demonic beast. Xiao Shuai looked at the monster for a long time, but still couldn't recognize it. Little Shuai was proficient in the language of all demonic beasts, so he naturally knew many demonic beasts. However, he had never seen such an ugly demonic beast. Muyu had never seen such an ugly monster before, but it wasn't his first time dealing with the demon race. The demon race had a special demonic power, but this ugly monster didn't have it at all. Who cares what it is? Let's kill it first. Muyu raised his shadow clone sword and sent out a stream of sword chi. The cyan sword light rose from the ground once again. However, Akatsuki's fleshy wings flapped forcefully, creating a gust of wind. Her entire body rapidly retreated. Cultivator, you deserve to die. Akatsuki's body flashed. She angrily stretched out her scaly hand and stroked the broken horn on her chest. Her eyes revealed a painful expression. Clearly, the broken horn had caused her to be seriously injured. Swish! Swish! Akatsuki's body kept surging. Following that, countless sword chi suddenly burst out from her body and shot out, dissipating in the air. It was none other than the sword chi that had invaded Muyu's body. Muyu had actually forced it out. Muyu knew that his sword chi had affected her, so he didn't hesitate any longer. The wind heart linking array appeared beside him once again. Xiao Shuai had already jumped into the array. A blue light shone from Xiao Shuai's body. Following that, a shadow suddenly shot over and landed in the array. It was Long Tongue. Where's Uncle? Muyu asked. I told him to stay here and not move. Long Tongue stretched out her dragon claw and pointed at a large rock in the distance. At this moment, Old Su was peeking his head out in horror. He was clearly afraid of the situation here, but he couldn't help but want to take a look. Uncle, hide yourself well, Muyu shouted. Old Su hurriedly nodded his head and retracted his head, revealing half of his face. He didn't want to miss this battle. After all, he could go back and brag about it for many years to see an immortal master in action. Big earthworm, you came at the right time. Let's cut off this ugly thing's wings together. Xiao Shuai had one hand on his waist, while the other hand was already holding a huge sword. The huge sword began to peel off the lightning in the air, causing all the white hair on his body to stand up. Why do you want to cut off its wings? Long Tongue's claw stomped, and Mu Yu's shadow sword shot out. It evolved into the shape of Long Xiaoyin's sword and was instantly swallowed by Long Tongue. Long Tongue's entire body became like a huge sword made of spiritual power and landed beside Xiao Shuai. Look at those meaty wings. They must be delicious when roasted, Xiao Shuai said with shining eyes. At the same time, he wiped his saliva with one hand. F***CK. How can you even eat such a disgusting thing? It came out of the yellow spring corpse water. Long Tongue's body exploded with powerful sword intent. He resisted the urge to stab Xiao Shuai. I feel that those wings can be cooked into the taste of braised pork ribs. It tastes the same as the meat birds in the mountains. Last time, I cooked the meat birds into the taste of braised pork ribs. Really? Braised pork ribs? Then I want to try it too. Long Tongue loved Xiao Shuai's braised pork ribs the most. Just a moment ago, he was still complaining about Xiao Shuai's heavy taste. In the blink of an eye, he threw this matter to the back of his mind. Aren't you too afraid of getting a stomachache from eating that? Can't you just happily beat him to death? Wouldn't it be better for us to catch a meat bird to eat? Muyu looked at the two weirdos beside him with a headache. Not only was there a lot of nonsense in a fight, but they could also talk about food. The two of them could actually eat such disgusting things. He really didn't know what was wrong with them. While they were discussing the roasted pork ribs, Akatsuki had already rushed over. The remaining horn on its chest emitted a dazzling red light. Then, the red light shot out as if it could tear through the void. The power it contained was not to be underestimated. Braised pork ribs. Long Tongue roared. His entire body had already rushed towards the red light. A dragon's breath shot out from his mouth, turning into thousands of sharp green sword shadows. All of a sudden, the red light was completely covered. However, the red light strangely emerged from the sky, full of sword shadows. At the same time, the yellow spring corpse water surged up violently, swallowing all of the sword shadows formed by Long Tongue. Spicy roasted pork ribs. Xiao Shuai also roared. Then, the heavenly sword in his hand flickered with blue light as he fiercely slashed towards Akatsuki in the distance. His heavenly sword carried an unparalleled, majestic lightning. The lightning surged as if it could repel thousands of evil spirits. When the yellow spring corpse water encountered the lightning, it seemed to deliberately avoid it, not daring to face it head-on. This yellow spring corpse water was indeed afraid of lightning. However, Akatsuki itself was not afraid of lightning. Its red light flashed and rushed in front of Muyu. Suddenly, it exploded. Thousands of dazzling red lights flashed, turning into thousands of thin threads that wrapped around Muyu. Muyu's sword chi crisscrossed, instantly destroying all of the spiderweb-like red threads. Akatsuki had already rushed forward. The long horn on its chest turned into a sharp weapon and headed towards Muyu's face. If you were to head toward me like that, I would have let you head it. Muyu muttered, but his hands did not slow down. The shadow clone sword blocked in front of his chest. The violent sword chi once again clashed with the horn, repelling Akatsuki. At the same time, Muyu's aura rose again. The shadow clone sword split into 9, and the sharp sword aura once again split into 9. Akatsuki did not dare to underestimate Muyu's sword. Its horn was a powerful weapon, but was actually shattered by Muyu's unstoppable sword. Therefore, it had to be careful and not let the rest of its horn be destroyed. The yellow spring corpse water surged forward. Dried bones and wood chips wandered in the corpse water. Akatsuki controlled it in its hand and turned it into a thick shield. On top of it, there was a skull with red light emitting from its eye sockets. The shield was very heavy, and its entire body was yellow in color. It was condensed from the eerie corpse water, and its degree of toughness had long surpassed everything. At the same time, Muyu's hand once again thrusted out a simple sword. One sword turned into a myriad of illusions, and the myriad of illusions was only one sword. The terrifying sword intent poured down in torrents. The grand Tao was simple, and the sword intent overflowed to the sky, unparalleled. The sword light rose from the ground and minced all the spirit energy in the surroundings. Cracks even appeared in the void. The unparalleled heavenly sword pierced through the shield formed from the yellow, spring corpse water. Kacha! The indestructible corpse water shield suddenly had a crack. Akatsuki's pupil shrank. Its entire body retreated, and the shield was instantly shattered into pieces. Muyu's sword slammed into the yellow spring corpse water and evaporated a large amount of it. Boom! The chaotic burial valley could no longer withstand this degree of destruction from the sword energy. The ground cracked, and rocks flew everywhere. The gap in the chaotic burial valley became even larger. Muyu gasped for breath. Using 9x9 to 1 twice in a row had consumed a large amount of his spirit energy. At this moment, the black and white spirit energy in his body was rapidly circulating, and it was far from enough. It was likely that Muyu would have to wait for several hours before he could use 9x9 to 1 for the third time. Exhausted? Then it's my turn. Akatsuki suddenly opened its long and narrow mouth. No one would have thought that its mouth, which was originally only a small slit, would open up to the size of a python's mouth. A terrifying suction force came from its mouth. The surrounding rocks were all sucked into its mouth. What was even more frightening was that the yellow spring corpse water turned into a column of water and poured into its mouth. This ugly monster was actually drinking the yellow spring corpse water. Ugh! Little Shuai and Long Tongue both retched. Muyu also felt that this guy was really abnormal. It even drank the yellow spring corpse water. However, after Akatsuki drank the yellow spring corpse water, its aura became stronger and stronger. It even faintly surpassed the severed soul stage and seemed to be on the verge of reaching the body fusion stage. Not good. We can't let it suck. Stop it. Muyu shouted. Akatsuki's stomach became bigger and bigger. Then it stopped sucking and burped. The rotten corpse energy was like a sharp sword that splashed out. Before the runes under Muyu's feet could flash, the yellow corpse energy had already splashed onto his body and sent him flying. Little Shuai and Long Tongue were directly swallowed by the yellow spring corpse water and disappeared from the chaotic burial valley. Little Shuai, Long Tongue, are you two okay? Muyu shouted. His body was splashed with disgusting things. Just as he was about to use his spiritual power to clean it up, his expression suddenly changed. This was because the yellow spring corpse water had directly sucked away all the spiritual power in his body. The moment he used his spiritual power, it immediately disappeared. This strange and disgusting yellow spring corpse water also had the effect of restraining spiritual power. Muyu looked at the sticky corpse water on his hand and discovered that even the spiritual power to maintain flight had been swallowed. His entire body immediately fell into the yellow spring corpse water in the chaotic burial valley. You can't fly anymore? Then go to hell. Akatsuki's figure was very fast. The horn in front of its chest immediately pressed against Muyu's chest. Muyu was slightly startled. The sharp horn scraped past his shoulder and left a shocking wound on his shoulder. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. That's not all. Akatsuki kicked Muyu's back and kicked him into the yellow spring corpse water. The yellow spring corpse water was turbulent. The monstrous waves rolled and formed a giant skull. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed Muyu. Chapter 585. Akatsuki sneered as it watched Muyu being submerged in the yellow spring corpse water. The surging corpse water continued to churn as if it was being boiled. The corpse water of a cultivator is definitely much stronger than these mortals. Unfortunately, Only the souls of those who died naturally are the purest. Otherwise, this brat soul would be a great tonic. Akatsuki's slender mouth stretched out a scarlet tongue as it licked its lips. It turned its head to look at the night sky. After fighting with Muyu for half the night, the sky was gradually brightening up. The horizon revealed the white of the fish belly, and the moon was gradually fading away. Chun Erzwang had already been killed by Muyu, but his 4 assistants had once again climbed back into the coffins. The coffins floated above the yellow spring corpse water, and the scarlet glow above the coffins had yet to dissipate. What a pity Chun Erzwang, who dealt in the dead, was destroyed by that brat. Then who should I find in the future? Akatsuki looked at the 4 coffins and fell in a deep thought. In order to collect the souls of those who died naturally, it had painstakingly used the wooden men to accelerate the speed of the villagers' deaths. It also had to do it stealthily to avoid being discovered by the cultivators here. With my current cultivation, if I make too much of a commotion, I'm afraid it will attract trouble. Why aren't the people from the 3rd layer of heaven here to receive me yet? Akatsuki swept its gaze over the distance, and then its gaze fell onto Old Man Su, who was trembling behind the rock. You can't see me, you can't see me, you can't see me. Old Man Su saw Muyu submerged in the yellow spring corpse water and was at a loss of what to do. He leaned his back behind the rock, and his legs had already turned to jelly. He wanted to run, but he couldn't. He could only close his eyes and speak with conviction. I forgot that there was still a living person here. Not killing you just now was the right thing to do. I'll let you take Chun Erzwang's place and obediently collect the dead for me. Kiki. Akatsuki lightly stepped on the ground, and the yellow spring corpse water transformed into a withered yellow ghost claw, which grabbed towards Old Man Su. Old Man Su felt that there was some movement in the air, and he opened his eyes in shock. He just happened to see a withered tree covering the sky, and was immediately scared witless. Don't catch me. Lord Muyu, please save me. I'm not old yet, and I still have dogs, ducks, and hens to feed. I don't want to die. Old Man Su hugged his head and shouted in panic. He regretted that he chose to watch the show instead of running away. In the end, his damn curiosity cost him his life. At this moment, he was so regretful that his intestines turned green. 5 thunders, braised pork ribs, spicy chicken wings. Just as the withered yellow ghost claw was about to grab old Su, blue lightning suddenly appeared in the sky and suddenly struck the ghost claw. The ghost claw formed from the corpse water of the underworld was instantly struck by the tyrannical lightning and turned into a pile of black fragments, dissipating in the air. A huge whirlpool was formed in the middle of the boiling yellow springs corpse water. 3 shadows soared into the sky from the yellow springs corpse water. One of the small shadows was holding a huge blue sword that was dozens of times larger than itself. It kept swinging it around. The blue lightning came from its sword chi. When the sword chi struck the yellow springs corpse water, the yellow springs corpse water would emit scorched smoke. Can the 2 of you not be so disgusting? Can't you just shout the slogan 5 thunders? Muyu frowned in disdain. The 2 of them were just fighting, yet they were shouting the names of dishes. The 3 of them were clean. The yellow springs corpse water that they were stained with had already been removed by him. How is this possible? You clearly fell into my yellow springs. You should have been corroded by the yellow springs corpse water. How can the 3 of you be safe and sound? Akatsuki was furious. It didn't understand how the 3 of them were still alive and kicking. Because our skin is thick. Little Shuai proudly blurted out. Thick skin your sister. I'm a very decent youth, with 3 virtues and 4 virtues. My skin is thin. Muyu couldn't help but curse. Then he revealed a mocking expression. I say, flesh-winged horn monster, you are the one who controls the Yellow Springs corpse water, but you don't even know the situation in the Yellow Springs corpse water. Are you stupid? The Yellow Springs corpse water was indeed very corrosive. Even if a body fusion cultivator was stained with so much corpse water, they would be finished if they didn't have special magic treasures. After all, the Yellow Springs corpse water would suck away the spiritual energy in the cultivator's body, making the spiritual energy unable to protect the cultivator's body. Without the protection of spiritual energy, the cultivator was no different from a mortal. However, the Mu Ling in Mu Yu's hand was extraordinary. It directly sucked him in. This Mu Ling was something that even the terrifying pressure of the heaven and earth barrier couldn't do anything to it. This mere corpse water was still too weak. As for little Shuai's thick skin, there was no need to talk about it. Even if it was marinated in the Yellow Springs corpse water for a few hundred years, it still wouldn't shed a single hair. As for the dragon vine, it relied on its fusion with the sword chi to forcefully block all the Yellow Springs corpse water. It was pulled into the Mu Ling by Mu Yu in time. This fellow isn't afraid of electricity, but its corpse water is. Let's help these resentful souls find peace. Mu Yu said solemnly. A large part of the Akatsuki's power came from this disgusting Yellow Springs corpse water. As long as this Yellow Springs corpse water was dealt with, then the little flesh-winged horned monster wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. The Akatsuki's face revealed a ruthless expression. How could it have thought that the first cultivator it encountered after coming out would be so difficult to deal with? The cultivator's strange techniques were endless, and he even knew how to use lightning that could restrain the Yellow Springs corpse water. However, it sneered and said, "You want to use lightning to deal with me? You're thinking too much. My Yellow Springs corpse water is endless. Let's see how you'll finish it with your little lightning." Endless? That's my technique. Mu Yu's heart skipped a beat. He gave a look to Xiao Shuai and Long Tongue. The three of them were all in the wind-wind heart-linking array, so they didn't need to speak to know each other's thoughts. Xiao Shuai and Long Tongue instantly understood Mu Yu's meaning. Xiao Shuai's heavenly lightning sword was raised high up in the air once again. The tens of thousands of lightning bolts grew in the wind, and a majestic aura instantly poured out. Xiao Shuai's mysterious lightning fall. The huge, heavenly lightning sword entered the clouds. Immediately, the wind blew and the clouds surged. It was unknown when, but pitch-black thunderclouds had already gathered in the sky. Electric sparks rolled and flickered in the thunderclouds. The thunder rumbled continuously, as if a heavy rain was about to fall. Wind, 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 dragon, tongue howls to the sky. Long Tongue's entire body was filled with sword aura. Its body became incomparably huge. The majestic dragon shadow, mixed with a majestic aura, turned into a tyrannical sword aura and flew towards the thunderclouds in the sky. Hiss! The bucket-thick thunderbolt seemed to have been provoked by Long Tongue. It suddenly struck towards Long Tongue. The brilliant heavenly might was insufferably arrogant. Its aura was like a rainbow, as if it wanted to uphold justice in the world. Meanwhile, the dragon vine spun in a straight line. The sword energy on its body was transformed into a sharp whirlpool. It opened its enormous dragon mouth and swallowed the bucket-sized thunderbolt in an instant. Long Tongue's entire body was filled with endless lightning sparks. The aura on its body became stronger and stronger, as if it had reached a certain critical point. Then it opened its mouth again, and a blue breath with terrifying lightning shot out. Below, Mu Yu's body was already covered by black and white inscriptions. The inscriptions were intertwined in the formation patterns. When Long Tongue's breath blasted out, the black and white inscriptions had already shrouded the dragon breath. Immediately, the bucket-thick thunderbolt was compressed again. Mu Yu held Long Tongue's breath in his hand. The terrifying and majestic thunderbolt power had already turned into a small white ball. It was only as thick as a thumb. However, the air around Mu Yu's palm seemed to be cut by some sharp blade. Traces of pitch-black cracks appeared. That white ball of thunderbolt was suppressed and wanted to rush out of Mu Yu's restraint. "I will let your Yellow Spring corpse water multiply endlessly." Mu Yu had already suppressed the thunderbolt to its limit. After that, he couldn't hold on any longer. He directly smashed it into the torrential Yellow Spring corpse water in Mass Burial Valley. Akatsuki's expression changed drastically. That terrifying thunderbolt made its heart palpitate. It flapped its wings, and the horn on its chest turned into a red light. It was like a sharp knife that met the thunderbolt. It had to rely on itself to block this terrifying thunderbolt. Otherwise, more than half of the yellow spring corpse water would definitely be destroyed by this thunderbolt. Bang! Boom! The horn on Akatsuki's chest was like an indestructible sharp blade. It easily destroyed the small thunderbolt in an instant. It laughed loudly. Flashy but impractical. If you have any other small tricks, feel free to use them. However, its expression changed drastically because it felt that something was wrong. The aura that made its heart palpitate did not dissipate because of the disappearance of the thunderbolt. That thunderbolt was still there. Hey, where are you going? Flesh-winged horn monster? Muyu had unknowingly appeared behind Akatsuki. Not only him, but Little Shuai and Long Tongue were also dozens of meters behind him. Muyu had not thrown out the thunderbolt in his hand. It was an illusion array. Akatsuki was shocked. It was able to set up the mind loss array, which meant that it had a certain understanding of arrays. Muyu had used an illusion array to confuse it, making it mistakenly think that the thunderbolt had already been thrown out. Akatsuki immediately turned around and charged at Muyu. However, countless Muyu figures suddenly appeared around it. Each Muyu was holding a terrifying thunderbolt in their hands. They were extremely powerful, and it was impossible to tell which one was the real one. The illusion array can actually fool me, but it ends here. Akatsuki gritted its teeth and roared. The red light on its body suddenly exploded. It was like 10,000 arrows shooting into the air. Array patterns appeared in the air. Under the impact of the red light, all the array patterns shattered like shattered mirrors. However, what shocked Akatsuki was that there were still 9 Muyu figures around it. These 9 Muyu were not holding the powerful thunderbolt in their hands. Instead, they were holding the green shadow swords. The thunderbolt was trapped at the tip of the shadow swords. Countless sword chi enveloped the thunderbolt, suppressing it until it was the size of a pea. The 9 shadow swords slashed out together. The thunderbolt was surrounded by sharp sword chi. It carried an aura that could destroy heaven and earth as it blasted towards the Yellow Springs corpse water. These 9 thunderbolts entered the Yellow Springs corpse water from 9 different directions. Their speed was so fast that Akatsuki could not catch up. You dare! Akatsuki actually didn't know when Muyu laid down such a powerful illusion array. However, the dragon vine in the sky had once again spat out bull-sized thunderbolts at Akatsuki. Akatsuki simply didn't have the ability to chase after the 9 thunderbolts. The moment the 9 thunderbolts came into contact with the Yellow Springs corpse water, all of the Yellow Springs corpse water suddenly let out terrifying and mournful howls. Next, the 9 thunderbolts instantly exploded. The powerful thunderbolts poured out and formed a blue vortex that stirred up all of the Yellow Springs corpse water. With a hissing sound, all of the Yellow Springs corpse water was covered by lightning. The originally turbulent Yellow Springs corpse water suddenly calmed down. The atmosphere became a little strange. Time seemed to have frozen at that point. The bones and wood chips in the Yellow Spring corpse water stopped floating. Even the red eye sockets of the skulls flashed with blue lightning. The Yellow Springs corpse water seemed to have been dried by the sun. It solidified and became hard. Then it gradually cracked open like an arid field, revealing shocking cracks. Pa! Pa! Then it turned into wisps of smoke and exploded violently, causing the entire mass burial valley to tremble violently. Chapter 586. How is this possible? Akatsuki looked in disbelief at the Yellow Springs corpse water that had turned into nothingness. Its face was filled with disbelief. Its Yellow Springs corpse water was refined from the energy of countless dead people over the years. Under its control, it was always successful. It was more than enough to fill the entire chaotic burial valley, but such a terrifying Yellow Springs corpse water was actually destroyed by the opponent's lightning ball. The walls of chaotic burial valley flashed with array runes. These array runes shocked it. It actually didn't know when Muyu had carved the array runes. Muyu jumped up and landed on the edge of chaotic burial valley. The walls under his feet once again flashed with black and white array runes. Before he came to Chaotic Burial Valley at night, he had already laid down array runes at the edge of Chaotic Burial Valley. It was so that he could use it to strengthen his array techniques at any time. Even when he was fighting with Akatsuki at the bottom of the valley, he didn't stay idle. Most of the walls at the bottom of the valley had been carved with array runes. These array runes were all connected together. The core of the array was the chaotic yin and yang in Mu Yu's body. His array techniques had already reached a superb level. As the leader of the array glyph sect, even if Akatsuki knew array techniques, how could it surpass him in terms of array Dao understanding? The lightning ball just now had borrowed the dragon spirit in Dragon Vine's body. Dragon Vine's normal attacks relied on the dragon spirit to compress and release the spirit energy in its body. This kind of attack was very powerful. Therefore, Mu Yu thought of letting Little Commander trigger the heavenly lightning. The dragon vines would then swallow and compress the power of the lightning and then spray it out. Finally, Mu Yu would continue to use the runes to compress the violent power of the lightning. The cooperation between the three of them could be said to be flawless. They had greatly shortened the time needed to compress the lightning, and with the help of Mu Yu's powerful illusory array, they had played Red Moon in the palm of their hands and destroyed its source of power. Damn, it's too uncomfortable. My tongue is numb from the electricity. At this moment, the dragon vine was gritting its teeth. Its mouth was still open, and its tongue was slanted to one side. Just now, it had swallowed all of Xiao Shuai's thunder and lightning, and it had also suffered the impact of the thunder and lightning. Even though it had used Mu Yu's sword energy to resolve it, it was still very uncomfortable from the electricity. Haha, big earthworm, I've long wanted to electrocute you. You look so silly when you stick your tongue out. Little Shuai looked at Dragon Vine, who had stuck out her tongue, and laughed. The giant thunder sword in his hand swayed back and forth. Little rat, do you want to die? Dragon Vine used its claws to pull at its numb tongue and stuffed it back in. Akatsuki's face was filled with anger. It didn't expect that it had underestimated the cultivator in front of it, causing it to suffer such a big loss. The Yellow Springs corpse water that had been collected for many years had been destroyed. You dare to destroy my Yellow Springs corpse water? I'll make you wish you were dead. The Yellow Springs corpse water was only a tool to make Akatsuki stronger, but Akatsuki's original strength was not to be underestimated. Even if it didn't rely on the Yellow Springs corpse water, it wouldn't have been so easily defeated by Mu Yu. Akatsuki let out a cruel laugh. Its giant wings flapped once again, and it turned into an afterimage as it rushed towards Mu Yu. The scarlet light on its body became brighter, and like a stream of light, it streaked across the void. In the blink of an eye, countless afterimages appeared in all directions, attacking Mu Yu from different angles. Mu Yu fearlessly clashed with Akatsuki's attack. The runes and the scarlet light collided with each other, causing an earth-shattering explosion. The scarlet hook and the cold sword energy clashed, and a violent spiritual energy swept out from the center of the two, reverberating in the sky above Chaotic Burial Valley for a long time. Mu Yu felt more and more tired as the fight went on. In the beginning, he had already used up a lot of spiritual energy. Now that he was using a powerful formation, the black and white spiritual energy in his body couldn't cope with it. Akatsuki had been relying on the Yellow Springs corpse water's power. Now that it didn't have the Yellow Springs corpse water, it began to use its true ability. Its consumption was insignificant compared to Mu Yu's. Bang! Mu Yu's speed became slower and slower, and he couldn't block Akatsuki's attack. The only horn on Akatsuki's chest was aimed at Mu Yu's heart. Mu Yu could only forcefully reach out his hand to meet the sharp horn. The powerful impact instantly sent Mu Yu flying. Mu Yu swung his hand. At this moment, his palm was burning with pain. It was almost pierced by the sharp horn. Even if his body was as hard as iron, he couldn't withstand this attack. The other party's horn was not an ordinary item. He was sent flying backwards, his body slanting down the slope of the disorderly burial valley. Akatsuki grinned. Its figure appeared above Mu Yu again and smashed down on Mu Yu's forehead. Little Shuai and Dragon Vine wanted to help, but they were entangled by Akatsuki's red light. When they broke free, Akatsuki's horn was only an inch away from Mu Yu's face. Mu Yu used his arms to protect his head. His entire body was blasted to the ground by the powerful impact. Akatsuki's figure fell to the ground again, not giving Mu Yu a chance to catch his breath. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred in the sky. Countless black and white runes suddenly shot up from the ground, turning into a wall of cold light that intertwined with each other, directly trapping Chi-Yu. Mu Yu rushed out of the rubble on the ground, gasping for breath. His hands were constantly forming seals. Countless inscriptions merged into the black and white light barrier, stabilizing the formation. Damn, it wasn't easy to lure you here. Before entering chaotic Burial Valley, Mu Yu had set up a trap here, just in case. This trap could be called the Spirit Killing Formation. It was a fixed formation that Master Lu had taught him. It used a total of 81 innate formation bases. It was not a joke. Master Lu's residents had set up this formation. At that time, it was used to restrict Situ Yantian's performance. Once it was activated, it could prevent the person trapped by the formation from circulating their spiritual power freely for a period of time. Bastard! Akatsuki angrily hit the black and white light barrier. It wanted to rush out, but the spiritual power in its body was severely suppressed. Even if it relied on brute force to break the barrier, it was useless. Politeness demands reciprocity. I'll give it a taste of its own medicine. Mu Yu snorted. Just now, when he was contaminated by the Yellow Spring corpse water, the Yellow Spring corpse water also severely limited his spiritual power. Now he was just using the same method to deal with this flesh-winged horn monster. Little Shuai and Long Tongue had already jumped to Mu Yu's side. The two guys looked at each other and attacked again. The blue lightning sword and the dragon-shaped sword soared into the sky, nurturing a terrifying power in the air. Spicy barbecue wings, braised pork ribs. Little Shuai and Long Tongue shouted their strange slogan again. Magnificent sword chi slashed down from the sky, fell into the cold light barrier, and fiercely slashed Akatsuki's body. A shrill scream resounded through the sky, shattering the clouds. Akatsuki roared endlessly. It couldn't muster any strength. Little Shuai and Long Tongue's sword chi intentionally or unintentionally slashed at the joint between its wings and body, forcibly cutting off its wings. Red blood splattered and gushed out from its back. Bang! Akatsuki smashed into the ground like a dead dog, creating a deep pit in the ground. It struggled to get up from the pit, but its body and mind were unstable, and it almost fell to the ground again. Yay! Little Shuai and Long Tongue's sword shadows happily clashed in the air, making clanging sounds to celebrate their victory. They couldn't wait to stare at the pair of fleshy wings. As long as it was a monster, there was nothing it couldn't eat. But after the pair of fleshy wings left Akatsuki's body, it slowly changed shape. With a splash, it turned into a puddle of yellow corpse water, falling from the sky like yellow rain to the ground, then evaporating and disappearing. Are these F** king wings formed by the Yellow Spring corpse water? Little Shuai cursed loudly. Such a disgusting thing instantly destroyed their appetite. Long Tongue also spat and cursed. F** I don't want to eat braised pork ribs anymore. Akatsuki's demonic eyes angrily glared at Mu Yu. It didn't expect that it would be beaten so badly by a cultivator. Speak. Where did you come from, monster? Mu Yu coldly asked. Akatsuki sneered. Stupid guy. Do you think I'll tell you? Not speaking? Then I'll do it myself. Mu Yu's gaze turned cold. Mu Ling turned into a godsoul wood and went around Akatsuki. He had to control this monster from an unknown place first. But at this moment, a cold aura suddenly enveloped Mu Yu. Mu Yu's expression changed slightly, and he had already retreated. At this moment, a ghastly sickle ruthlessly slashed at Mu Yu's spirit severing array. Bang! The spirit extinguishing array technique trembled and all of the array bases shook. However, it still managed to hold on. But what Muyu didn't expect was that another 6 ghastly sickles would slash at the spirit-severing array, directly blasting a huge hole in the spirit-severing array. The 6 sickles and a sickle were all attacks from the Heaven Combining stage. The attacks from 7 Heaven Combining stage cultivators were too strong. Even if Muyu's spirit-severing array was more powerful, it couldn't block it. "Brat, I didn't expect you to find this place before us." Gui Han's figure slowly appeared in front of Muyu. His Heaven Combining stage cultivation once again pressed down on Muyu. The spirit-severing array had a hole in it. Akatsuki recovered its spiritual energy and immediately rushed out. But at this moment, it had lost its wings and once again turned into a woman in black. It was just that this woman's chest was still missing. The difference between an ugly monster and a beautiful woman was just a thought. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, who would have thought that this beautiful woman in front of him was so ugly? Swish, swish, swish. From time to time, people from the gate of hell flashed out. Monstrous ghost chi instantly enveloped the entire disorderly burial valley, causing Muyu's heart to sink to the bottom of the valley. Muyu didn't expect that he would actually meet people from the gate of hell in the disorderly burial valley. Akatsuki stared resentfully at Muyu, then turned to Guihan and the others and said coldly, "Why did you come so late?" To Muyu's surprise, the Heaven Combining stage Guihan actually lowered his head to Akatsuki, who was only at the spirit-severing stage, and said respectfully, "Lord Akatsuki, the Ghost Lord asked us to do something else, so we were delayed. With Lord Akatsuki's ability, we thought that there was nothing that could threaten you." What was the relationship between Akatsuki and the people from the gate of hell in the disorderly burial valley? Although the people from the gate of hell were all very evil, they were still humans after all. Why would they be so respectful to a monster? Originally, there was no threat, but I was still in the recovery stage and was heavily injured by this bastard. Kill him for me. Akatsuki pointed angrily at Muyu. Yes, this subordinate obeys. Guihan raised his head and looked at Muyu with a sinister expression. Little brat, last time you were lucky to escape. This time, let's see how you escape. Guihan's sickle was already raised high. Damn it, why are the Japanese always lingering around? Chapter 587. Muyu was surrounded by a large group of people from the Gate of Hell. 7 of them were even-body integration stage people from the Gate of Hell. If he wanted to escape, he would have to put in a lot of effort. Muyu, what do we do now? Long tongue wrapped around Muyu's shoulder and vigilantly looked at the ghost aura around them. What else can we do? At worst, you can swallow the lightning that I summoned and give it to this group of Japanese people. Xiao Shuai's lightning sword was still in his hand, but its power was much weaker. When Xiao Shuai and Long Tongue used the sword array, Muyu's spiritual power was exhausted. He had just fought with the flesh-winged horn monster, and now he felt a little exhausted. The Japanese people really came at the wrong time. Muyu's feet flickered with runes. He was currently thinking of an escape route. The runes that he had set up in the valley could no longer be activated. In the distance, there was a pale-faced old man, Su, who was covering his mouth and not daring to breathe. A gentle breeze suddenly blew through the valley, as if it was blowing away the darkness before dawn. In that instant, everyone raised their heads at the same time and looked towards the east. The first rays of the morning sun finally penetrated the clouds and poured over chaotic Burial Valley, illuminating a few eerie ghost figures above chaotic Burial Valley. This was a very normal thing, but Akatsuki's body suddenly trembled. She shouted in shock and anger. The sunlight of the third layer of heaven. No, I can't live without the corpse water of the underworld. Quick! This disgusting monster was actually afraid of the sunlight of the third layer of heaven. Guihan was slightly shocked. Monstrous ghost fog instantly covered Akatsuki's body, but Akatsuki was still howling in pain. Her voice was shrill and shrill, causing people's eardrums to hurt. All the people from the Gate of Hell no longer cared about Muyu. They all poured out their own ghost aura to envelop Akatsuki. Layer after layer of ghost fog surrounded Akatsuki. However, Akatsuki's body seemed to have something special. The ghost fog was actually unable to envelop her. The sunlight seemed to be attracted by the red glow on her body. It actually penetrated the ghost fog and shone on Akatsuki's body. Even through the dark ghost fog, Muyu could clearly see that Akatsuki's body was like something that specialized in attracting sunlight. When the sunlight shone on her body actually emitted red smoke. "No, I need the corpse water of the underworld." Chiyu howled in pain and anger. His entire body turned into a pure red light, which was extremely demonic. She actually reached out and grabbed an out-of-body stage person from the gate of hell. The red glow in her hand surged, and she instantly tore the person from the gate of hell apart. That person from the gate of hell didn't even have time to react before he turned into a puddle of yellow corpse water. The red glow covered his body like a yellow veil. However, the sunlight was like a shadow. In an instant, the yellow corpse water on Akatsuki's body was completely evaporated. No, the corpse water of someone who didn't die of natural causes can't resist the sunlight. Akatsuki howled in pain. In the blink of an eye, she tore another out-of-body stage person from the gate of hell apart. The expressions of all the people from the gate of hell changed greatly. For a moment, they even forgot to attack Muyu. They didn't expect that Akatsuki would kill 2 people from the gate of hell in order to save her own life. If this continued, apart from the 7 out-of-body stage people from the gate of hell, the rest of the people wouldn't be able to escape this fate. For a moment, all the people from the gate of hell looked at Akatsuki with disgust. The out-of-body stage people from the gate of hell had already retreated. They didn't want to become ghosts in the hands of Akatsuki. After the corpse water of the underworld was cleansed by Muyu, Akatsuki actually developed a phobia of sunlight. Furthermore, the red glow in her eyes seemed to be specially made to attract sunlight. There was no way for her to avoid the sunlight. The sunlight caused her unbearable pain. Dirty and gloomy things would die if they were exposed to sunlight. Perhaps this was a monster like Akatsuki. Seeing Akatsuki howling madly, Guehan's face was also filled with shock. He actually didn't know how to deal with such a situation. After all, according to the orders they received, Akatsuki had already prepared a foolproof plan. She wouldn't be afraid of the sunlight of the third heaven at all. However, they didn't expect that the turbulent corpse water of the underworld would actually be cleansed by Muyu. "Lord Akatsuki, you can't kill our people anymore. Tell me, what should I do now?" Guehan also distanced himself from Akatsuki, afraid that he would be targeted by Akatsuki. People who died of natural causes. Quickly go and find people who died of natural causes, whether it's their souls or their corpses. Akatsuki roared angrily. Natural causes meant that one's lifespan would automatically come to an end, and their vitality would completely disappear. The souls and corpses of natural causes were the purest. Because the vitality of the corpses was exhausted, there was no way to retain the soul. Therefore, the soul would completely separate from the corpses. However, if it was suicide or murder, it would end before the vitality of the body was completely exhausted. It couldn't be considered a natural death. Guehan was stunned for a moment. How could they find people who died of natural causes at this time? They could rush down the mountain and instantly kill all the villagers at the foot of the mountain. However, Akatsuki wouldn't even care about the people they killed. Although there were people who died of natural causes every day, it wasn't something that they could encounter at any time. Quickly, Akatsuki roared in shock and anger. When had Guehan ever received such an impossible order? Natural causes could create diseases like plagues and slowly erase a person's vitality. This required time, and there was a risk of failure. Even the people of the gate of hell couldn't grasp the degree of success, because sometimes people who died of plagues didn't even die of natural causes. "Brat, what did you do to Lord Akatsuki?" Guehan turned around and wanted to grab Muyu and interrogate him. However, Muyu had already disappeared without a trace. The people of the Gate of Hell were afraid of being killed by Akatsuki. If Muyu didn't take advantage of the chaos to escape, would he be waiting to send warmth? What kind of monster is that? It's actually afraid of sunlight? This is too strange. Muyu brought Old Su and rushed out of Chaotic Burial Valley. He secretly observed everything in Chaotic Burial Valley from afar. He was very puzzled. Akatsuki's eyes were originally red. However, after the sunlight shone on it, its entire body was covered in red light. He couldn't see what was happening to its body. It must be that the monster is too disgusting. Even the sun doesn't want to see it. Dragonvine said, "Why do I feel that this monster is very familiar?" Little Shuai rubbed his chin and racked his brain to recall memories of this monster. However, he couldn't remember anything. Familiar? Could it be your distant relative? Muyu rubbed Little Shuai's head and laughed. "But at least you look very cute." "It's Shuai," Little Shuai corrected. Old Su was shivering at the side. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. This place was very far from Chaotic Burial Valley. He was just a mortal without any cultivation. He didn't have the powerful vision of a cultivator. He didn't know what was happening in Chaotic Burial Valley. "Lord Muyu, Lord, is that monster going to die?" Old Su asked in fear. Muyu shrugged his shoulders and asked with concern. "I don't know. Uncle, are you hurt anywhere?" Old Su fell when he was running away. There was a large wound on his hand. Muyu took out some medicine and applied it on his hand. Then, he told him to quickly go home. Muyu cast an invisibility spell on himself and went back to Chaotic Burial Valley. He had to confirm whether this monster was dead or not. The Chaotic Burial Valley had been completely enveloped by the ghostly aura, but the light on Red Moon's body was like a dazzling red sun. It was incomparably clear in the ghostly aura, and it reflected off the sun in the sky. The difference was that the sun in the sky was very warm. On the other hand, Akatsuki was in extreme pain. The people from the Gate of Hell were already at a loss. They only received orders to come to the Mayan mountain range to rescue Akatsuki. They didn't even know where Akatsuki was. They also heard the news of Chaotic Burial Valley from the cultivators in the Mayan mountain range. They rushed over to find Akatsuki. Originally, everything was going smoothly. Who would have thought that their Lord Akatsuki would have a phobia of sunlight? All of this was related to Muyu destroying the torrential yellow spring corpse water in Chaotic Burial Valley. However, the people from the Gate of Hell didn't seem to know Akatsuki's specific situation. They didn't even seem to understand the monster Akatsuki. Even if they knew, it would be useless. Where could they find so much yellow spring corpse water in such a short time? They wanted to move Akatsuki to the dark, chaotic burial valley. However, Akatsuki was constantly howling. It didn't even have the ability to move. The ghost chi of the other people from the Gate of Hell would be evaporated by the red light as soon as they approached it. The sun rose higher and higher. Akatsuki howled in pain for 2 hours. Finally, its entire body suddenly became more and more dazzling. The red light became very strong. Boom! It was like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven. The whole world trembled. Akatsuki actually exploded on the spot. In an instant, the entire chaotic burial valley was destroyed. The terrifying sound of the explosion was too terrifying. None of the out-of-body stage people from the Gate of Hell managed to escape. All of them were evaporated into nothingness. Only 7 body integration stage people from the Gate of Hell and 10 severed soul stage people from the Gate of Hell managed to escape when they saw that the situation wasn't good. Muyu looked at all of this in shock. The development of the situation was too dramatic. The strange Akatsuki was actually dealt with by the sun. It was really unexpected. The huge explosion spread far and wide, alarming the people within a radius of a few hundred miles. Many people did not understand where the explosion came from, and there were also some cultivators with low cultivation nearby. At this moment, they were rushing over, wanting to find out what was going on. Gue Han and the people from the Gate of Hell reappeared with ashen faces. They looked at the messy, chaotic burial valley. They couldn't find Akatsuki's corpse. "Go. We can't let anyone know about our matter," Gue Han said coldly. The cultivation of the cultivators in the Moyen Mountain Range is very low. Can't we just kill whoever dares to come? One of the people from the Gate of Hell said hesitantly. No, the higher-ups said that the Moyen Mountain Range isn't a simple place. It's best not to kill people here. Seeing that the commotion was getting bigger and bigger, the people from the Gate of Hell left without hesitation. Obviously, they didn't want to attract too much attention. Akatsuki didn't leave any traces after the explosion. This was to their advantage. Muyu also left the chaotic burial valley. He brought little Shuai and Long Tongue back to Old Su's house. In the next few days, more and more cultivators came to the vicinity to inquire about the situation. However, Muyu had already left the village. Once Akatsuki died, the spell it cast on others had already lost its effect. Old Su's life was also no longer in danger. The sudden explosion in the chaotic burial valley caused the Moyun Mountain Range to be in an uproar again. All kinds of strange folk versions emerged one after another, including rumors like the Gate of Hell of the King of Hell has been opened, and countless little ghosts have escaped from prison to the human world. For a time, it caused panic among the people. Naturally, the cultivators didn't believe this, but they couldn't explain this phenomenon because they couldn't find any special traces in the phenomenon. With the cultivation of the cultivators in the Moyen Mountain Range, it was impossible for them to discover the special and strange spiritual power. Muyu was still tracking down the whereabouts of the people from the Gate of Hell. This was because the monster Akatsuki and the people from the Gate of Hell were inextricably linked. It didn't make sense that the people from the Gate of Hell were very respectful to it. As for what seal Akatsuki had broken free from, Muyu didn't know. However, one thing he was sure of was that Akatsuki's death didn't mean that this matter was over. On the contrary, it was just the prelude to the conspiracy of the people from the Gate of Hell. The people from the Gate of Hell spent so much effort to catch demon beasts and even came to find a monster with fleshy wings and horns. What's going on? Muyu was very puzzled. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.